Olympus is tall by day. At night it becomes deep. Clouds that earlier had ambition now fold themselves into patient layers over the ridge. Wind finds a key that turns locks quietly. The old path that threads from shepherd meadow to marble shrine to a platform of view keeps the day's footprints like neat, harmless accounts. The gods, who wear many names and more masks, let their shoulders drop. Thunder is asleep in a far room. The mountain's firs, dark as closed eyes, keep watch, but without the severity of centuries, more like elders who know everyone's name and greet even the night insects courteously. If you imagine Zeus, let it be as a man who has stepped away from the balcony to let the air be air. His hand rests on a rail made of the same wood as ships. His fingers keep the shape of a forgotten laurel twig. Near him, Hera folds a cotton shawl once, twice, with the expertise of someone who respects cloth. A cool amphora sits under the eaves. Beads of water form and fall, forming a very local rain that harms nothing. The mountain breeze, so do they. Power, tonight, is the ability to place a cup where it will not be knocked over in the dark. Athena keeps a lamp low and trims it with the knife she also uses to cut bread. No all announces, but the bird is close. Its presence is the silence that makes other sounds legible. She unrolls a small map drawn not on papyrus, but in memory paths between olive groves, the line of a canal, the safe way through a crowded room when speech would make things worse. War stays in its box. Wisdom arrives in the shape of an extra blanket placed over sleeping shoulders without ceremony. Under her lamp, a sprig of wild thyme keeps its scent and asks no question too large to answer. Poseidon is a rumor of tide this far inland. His trident leans harmlessly against a wall the way a rake leans when a garden has been watered correctly. In the harbor far below the mountains gaze, boats nose into their moorings like animals who know the difference between tether and welcome. Nets rinse themselves in a slip of current, not minding work that continues even in rest. On the cliff road, a lone lantern moves like a soft kama, and then disappears into an inn's doorway where salt dries on thresholds that have never told a soul on anyone. Artemis counts, but softly, the steps of a deer over pine needles. The heartbeats between the moon's rise and the first silver poured into a brook, the number of times a child turns in sleep when a night is gentle and complete. Her bow isn't strung, not out of neglect but out of trust. She runs a finger over the line of an arrow's shaft and finds it true. She sets it aside because correctness can wait for daylight. The forest agrees. A fox chooses a path that spares a nest. A rabbit finishes one more mouthful and sits like a folded hand. Apollo has set his lyre down where its strings can cool into their own grace. Music happens anyway because cicadas keep a narrow band of fidelity to what matters and frogs know when to enter. On a coast altar, the last heat leaves a stone that earlier kept an offering warm. The song that the day insisted upon has decided to take off its shoes and sit on a step. The air is the kind that goes into chest and returns better than it arrived. If prophecy speaks at Delphi tonight, it will be to say sleep. Hermes lets his sandals rest near the door as a guest does. The road does not go away. It simply leans against a low wall and listens to others for an evening. Messages tuck themselves under cups as condensation, as the faint fog that gives leaves their silver. A coin is given and refuses to ring loud on wood. Thieves have nothing to do in a world where nothing is withheld. In houses where someone waits for someone, the waiting is shorter by a measure no clock can mark, because the door knows how to open before the knock completes itself. Hestia establishes the center as quietly as a well does. Hearth fires turn their flame down to the size of a careful thought. Pots make their small arguments with lids, and lids agree. The round of a table, the square of a room, the curve of a shoulder into a clean pillow, this is her geometry. A crust of bread is put into a cloth. A sip of wine becomes water, and then becomes sleep. Faithfulness feels like a bench that will not wobble, and a key that turns without having to instruct the hand on how to hold it. Hephaestus lets the last coals find their own red and watches them without asking for more. Tools that will make other tools lie quiet and cast tidy shadows. A hinge turned earlier sits in a pan of oil and learns hospitality. On a shelf, a small bronze imperfect love cools into its final face. Sparks that earlier leapt like thoughts now sit like punctuation. The workshop, which is a spine by daylight, becomes a ribcage at night, holding the heart of the house in a protective rhythm. Aphrodite's shore has perfected the art of not insisting. Full moon rolls in bands so regular that even the mind bends into agreement. A comb lies on a flat stone and remembers hair. A mirror set face down reflects only the idea of light from the stone's pale belly. Lovers are asleep to breaths alternating like a pleasing counterpoint. What is beautiful now is the part of beauty that knows how to last. Tenderness exhausting itself into calm. Admiration becoming caretaking, desire making room, and then keeping that room clean. Even ours let him be unarmed for the hour. A strap is unbuckled. A heel that might have witnessed a clash witnesses to dogs taking turns with the same stick. The part of courage that looks like restraint sets a bowl of water out for a stranger. Helmets make excellent bowls when turned over. Teachings can be found on both sides of any object, provided you are willing to learn from edges as well as surfaces. Dionysus closes the house with attention, not with exuberance. The vine weaves itself along a trellis and decides to be leaf tonight more than grape. A cup is poured to the brim and shared among four, then set down still half full. Laughter shrinks to a smile that warms a room the way a coal warms a kettle by standing near. The olive tree closest to the porch keeps its shade unspent, as if promising a cool place for tomorrow's noon. If the fates are busy, it is with threading a needle for someone who can't quite see the eye in this light. They draw a length of something sturdy and give the end a small kiss and pass it into waiting fingers. The thread pulls through cleanly, and a tear is saved for another day. The loom in the corner goes still. The night cracks one fig open and leaves it, sweet and perfect, on a plate by the good chair. The plate does not mind waiting. Olympus at rest is not empty. It is well ordered. What gets done is the version of work that helps mornings. Tools are put where hands will expect them. Pots are cleared of one stone apiece. Water jars are filled to the mark the house believes is generous. Words are folded and stacked like linens, ready to be opened without creases that chain them off. The gods move like people who have remembered the correct speed for being alive. The mountain keeps the record in the dark without the slightest sense of burden. You may sleep here as you sit, no ceremony needed. The olive leaves will handle the counting. The marble will store the last warmth you do not need. The sea will accept the small stories that rose from your day and return them tomorrow as shells with neat holes you can thread. Let Olympus lean over you the way a doorframe leans over a threshold. Nothing will pass that is not kind. If it does pass, it will be made kind by the company it keeps. Breathe as if climbing and rest as if you have arrived. Both are true. Begin with a room that is larger than rooms, a quiet field of dark, the kind that doesn't worry about edges. In that hush, a pulse starts soft, even trustworthy. Earth takes shape around it, not in a hurry, not all at once. You could call her Gaia if you like. She is the comfort of weight, the promise of place, the patience of soil that has agreed to hold roots and footfalls, and the small secrets of seeds. She rises like a warm loaf cooling in night air, hills in slow exhalations, valleys as thoughtful pauses where water will someday rest. Over her, a second presence learns how to lean without pressing. This is the sky Oranos, a quiet vault finding the correct distance. He tries on shades, first blue as a whisper, then the velvet of night, then pale linen at morning. He learns that shining is kinder when it leaves room for shade, and that thunder, when it must exist, is a sentence best used sparingly. Between earth and sky a practice develops. She offers horizon. He brings weather. Nothing is taken. Everything is arranged. The first agreements are simple and enduring. You keep the stones, says Oranos, and teach them to be still. You keep the light, says Gaia, and teach it to be gentle. A breeze follows, well behaved. Dew tries a leaf and likes it. Far below, the dark remains, not as absence but as pantry, a place to keep coolness, metals quiet. Far above, stars practice their small, exact grammar. Orion placing 3 careful dots. The Pleiades clustering like a note held softly by many voices. A faint river of milk learning to cross the whole sky without spilling. Time enters on tiptoe. It is not a conqueror, more a helpful caretaker with an armful of folded hours. On Gaia's broad table, mountains stand to greet it, then sit back down, becoming exactly themselves. Oranos drapes day across the peaks, and collects it again without fuss. Where land meets sea, a low conversation begins, lips of short teaching waves to speak in phrases, and to end their sentences neatly. The sea has the good sense to repeat itself. Repetition, it discovers, is partly rest. If you must have beginnings in the form of names, let them arrive like children sent out into a safe yard. Rivers move first, uncertain then sure, drawing pale lines that darken where the slope agrees. They introduce themselves. I am memory in water. Forests follow, within the river's audible comfort, juniper, laurel, olive. The trees propose roofs for birds and shade for people who will one day sit and discuss bread. Stones in the shallows learn to be rounded without losing their honor. The shore becomes a patient teacher. The tide an eager student who enjoys homework. Life discovers that Gaia's lap has many pockets. Moss adds a soft vowel to rock. Ferns write careful green sentences along ledges. In the high light, the first quiet bees learn a geography. Flower, then home. Oranos keeps watch without making a performance of it. He learns cloud shapes that reassure, long fleece for slow days, small coins for thirsty fields, and practices the art of withholding storm when it would do no good. On some nights, he pulls the moon thin as a silver thread and lays it across the water as if hemming the horizon. The earliest stories about Titans need not sharpen themselves tonight. Let them be hills and currents, winds and seasons. Ocean is a vast, ringing belt of water making room for coasts and islands. Tethys guiding springs like a mother guiding a child through a crowd. Hyperion and Thea introducing day to sight and sight to color. Reaccounting the heartbeats of the year and placing fruits into baskets at the right time. Themis teaching rivers to keep their banks and words to keep their meanings. In this telling, strength is logistics with grace. Gaia keeps house with gestures the body understands. In the shade at midday, she tilts a slope so a traveler's breath can catch up. At evening she pockets warmth in stones and gives it back through a bench on which to strangers sit and become less strange. She files rain into cisterns under the name of later. She stores, without speech, the sound of footsteps that once agreed to slow down here. Oranos, for his part, becomes a librarian of light, lending dawns and collecting twilights, stamping stars with dates only the careful will notice. Night is not absence in this world, only depth. Nyx, the soft mother of shade, lays her velvet without demanding anything from the sleepers beneath. Hemera, the day, follows her like a patient sister, setting chairs upright and opening shutters a hand's width. Yas, the dawn, arrives the way a careful letter arrives, folded well, nothing missing, a speck of gold where the wax was. Each has a key, each uses it with courtesy. Gaia turns once in her sleep to make room for roots finding their line. Oranos lets the Milky Way put a palm on his shoulder and leaves it there. If anyone speaks of division of earth and sky parted, let it be a kind story, not tearing, only tearing, a seam measured so mountains can breathe and clouds can pass, a hem allowance so trees may sway and still stand, a space for light to move and air to rest. The word for this is between, and it is a good word when kept in the correct hands. Lovers discover it when leaving a place at table for one another. Friends keep it when they know how to share a bench. Between is where respect remembers what it is. Soon, craft comes from craft. On the long coasts, Women learn to read the wind and the surface of water, teaching boats to bow correctly. On a flat, clear sheet of night, men mark a path with stars and then notice that the chosen line also pleases the heart. Someone ties a rope from flax and likes the feel of it. Someone else ties a different rope from wool and likes that too. A child draws a circle with a stick. Rain falls. The circle becomes a pool that holds a pocket of sky. Uranus admires himself there without vanity. Gaia smiles privately and sets a small stone where the child's heel slipped, so the next step will be steadier. When the first temples rise, they do not start by asking the heavens to kneel. They start by asking the ground how wide its patience. Columns answer in flutes that keep their own breezes. Stones meet at corners where shadow behaves well. Altars hold not triumphs, but ordinary offerings: a bowl of oil, a cup of water, a handful of grain. Priests learn that silence is an instrument, and that speaking is often best done after a person has eaten. The gods, if they come as good guests, hands washed, sandals left by the door, hunger modest, attention unhurried. If you listen closely you can hear the loom begin, its heddle raising threads as a breath raises ribs. Patterns are not imposed, they are invited. A boarder learns to hold a field, and not keeps its promise at the back where no one sees, and therefore where honesty matters most. Ropes from ships will find cousins in those knots. Laws from cities will remember these borders. Weaving is the first calm theorem, that under and over repeated kindly makes shelter. The sky does occasionally practice the louder weather. Rain must learn to fall. Thunder must learn to announce, and then be quiet. But tonight it is the other lesson. How to let stars say most of what needs saying. How to let the moon keep track of time without arguing with crops. How to send a breeze to collect launder sky and return it folded. Gaia keeps paths passable with the simplest maintenance. A stone moved, a branch trimmed, a little dust tapped where sandals scuffed. The earth is not precious about being touched. She knows the difference between harm and use. As for people small and late, let them be welcomed without fanfare. They find figs on a low branch and understand that sweetness can be neat. They find springs and learn that gratitude is water's chosen language. They write names for places on tablets and discover that the best names are small enough to fit in the mouth of a child. They look up and learn to call the constellations by stories that keep courage friendly and loss bearable. They sleep under roofs that imitate leaves and are therefore honest about their limits. When it is time to rest, Gaia presents a slope that matches a body's curve. Uranus lowers the light until the eyes learn it is safe to close. A cricket strikes its single string. A wave spends its last coin on the shore and is content. The first fire dins. Embers write short words to the night and sign them with the scent of wood. A cup is turned mouth down on the table. Dew rehearses its arrival there. Dawn is not yet, but it is certain. Breathe with the world that has just been set to rights. Inhale to the slow rise of a hill, pause on its crest. Exhale to the line where sea accepts you. Again, inhale for the lights of small villages. Pause for an olive leaf's silver. Exhale for the distance that is allowed to remain distance. No thrones are being argued over here. No battles need to be remembered. Only the high, kind marriage of below and above, maintained by respect and the good craft of days. And when you sleep, let the mattress be named for Gaia, the ceiling for Uranus, and the space between for all the names you will not need tonight. If you dream, let it be of a thread pulled smooth through a cloth and of a shoreline that remembers every step without ever keeping one. Tomorrow begins inside this agreement. For now the world is made gently, and you are allowed to rest inside it. Think of power changing hands not as a shout but as a harvest. Fields do not switch from green to gold all at once. They lean, they consider, they agree. So it is with the old tall beings we call Titans and the later, quicker ones we call Olympians. The story remembers tempests, but tonight we count the quieter mechanics, how key gets past, how a tool learns a new grip, how a season settles into the next without losing its courtesy. Kronos let him be a careful clock rather than a fear. He keeps Breneries counted, measures shadows on stones, turns the year by nudging it with a thumb at the right hinge. Beside him, Rhea makes time tender. She stocks baskets, names days for births and bread, ties ribbons on hours that deserve to be found again. Their children arrive like months, one after another, each set gently on a cloth that has room. The old tale places a sharp blade in this room. Let us give it a garden's assignment. The sickle, instead of a weapon, becomes a pruning hook. Vines are trained along a trellis. Excess is trimmed so fruit can sweeten. Shade is shaped so noon will forgive. From Titan to Olympian is the difference between a field that obeys only weather and a field that listens to a hand as well. The blade is the same. The use is changed. So the century shifts. When Zeus is born, the mountain does not thunder. It makes space. A goat gives milk, ordinary and sufficient. Stones keep watch and learn a cradle's weight. Rhea understands what mothers have always understood. Sometimes the world needs a decoy, and sometimes the world needs a lullaby. She supplies both, in that order. Kronos, who likes ledgers, sleeps with a book open, and the page catches a moth that decides to stay. The hour passes without incident. We are told of a cave, of a rock wrapped in cloth, of a father who miscounts by exactly the amount a story requires. Tonight we notice instead the moss that keeps the cave's floor fit for bare feet, the spring that remembers to be cold. The slow lesson the mountain teaches about keeping promises small enough to keep. The child breathes. The world learns to do two things at once, endure and prepare. Elsewhere, a thought matures. That strength which times and tallies is not the only strength. Memory joins it. Mnemosyne walking the slope with 9 imagined daughters at her side. Music, story, measure, dance, astronomy, all the gentle instruments that teach power to become proportion. The Titans keep the bones of the world upright. The future will ask for the ligaments, the cords, the tuning pegs. There is room for all of this on the same hill. One by one, the young learn their trades in rooms that already know how to hold work. Hestia sets a hearthstone and proves that center is a verb. Demeter tests grain with her teeth and names the correct rain. Hera folds law into marriage like salt into bread. Present, invisible, necessary. Poseidon learns the behavior of harbors and teaches waves to be neighbors with walls. Athena, when she arrives, refuses noise. She chooses thread and builds cities out of line and edge, bridge and plaza, bench and school. Hermes, late and light-footed, ashes a footprint on a threshold and laughs without disturbing the door. There is a time when both generations share the sky the way two lamps share a table, one brighter, one older, the room improved by both. Atlas holds shoulder sure, and the new ones learn to look without flinching. Oceanus keeps his ring. Younger hands chart coasts kindly on waxed boards. Hyperion washes the ridges in mourning, and a later hand names the places the light touches. No one is unmade. Everyone is rearranged. If there is a struggle, let it be like the argument between winter and spring, firm, necessary, not cruel. Snow admits defeat inch by inch and finds dignity in watering the seed it covered. Buds take their small risks and are forgiven when they fail. Streams carry the minutes from one bank to the other. Frogs try their voices and keep only the pitches that suit the night. Victory is simply what the ground needed next. The tools move to new pegs on the same wall. A thunderbolt is taught to count to 3 before speaking. A trident learns to calm as well as to strike. The aegis, for all its edge, is repurposed into shade for travelers who arrive hot and uncertain. The old heavy crowns gather respectful dust. Wreaths of laurel and olive take their place, renewable, light, easy on the brow. The world is happier in headgear that grows back. Languages change gently. Titans name mountains and seas. Olympians name streets and festivals. The older names remain under the newer, like bedrock under paving stones. You can feel them when the shoes are thin and the day is long. A festival is thrown not to forget the past but to remember it in a way that does not tire children. Cakes are baked into shapes that explain. Wine is poured into cups that can be lifted by the young. Stories are told in measures the ear can carry home. At a certain hour, the last formality occurs. The door between rooms is held, and both sides pass through at once, as people do when they have learned courtesy to a symmetry. Kronos counts the steps and closes his book. Rhea places a hand on a young shoulder, not to direct, only to bless. The new keepers of the house set chairs back under the table and sweep once more, not because the floor is dirty but because it is good to begin by recognizing where dust likes to rest. The sky tests the arrangement with weather suited to new roofs. A fine rain that shows which eaves are honest. A sun that discovers which courtyards make peace with shade. The sea tests harbors with swell just large enough to require thinking and not large enough to punish it. Fields accept seed from hands that will also accept the blister and learn from it. People small in any version of the story sleep better for the exchange they are barely aware of. Morning proofs the change and finds no error. Do the Titans leave? Not so much as move to other rooms. They become background in the best sense. Reliable span. Durable stone, the long, slow music of rivers. They visit in dreams as cliffs and meadows, as seasons that still keep their appointments, as elder hours that can be borrowed for courage. The Olympians become foreground, closer, quicker, more legible to cities, but they are not thin. They carry gravity without dragging it. In time, the new ones will practice their own corrections. Temper, measure, apology, repair. They will learn that thunder is effective only when rare, that law is a tone kept in a room, that feasts are arguments for winter made in autumn while the evidence is fresh. They will need the old patience as much as the world ever did. The difference now is that the instruments are closer to the hand, the lyre within reach, the lamp on the sill, the olive press in the courtyard. Power's residence has moved downstairs. Walk the slope where this happened, and you will find no battlefield, only terraces. Stones hold water, water holds light, light holds breath. Children chase each other under fig trees or on a pillar that remembers both eras and prefers neither. It likes shade for being shade. A shepherd counts his flock with a piece of thread knotted at intervals. On the next hill, a mason lifts a block that two men can manage together and sets it where it makes a doorway, not a wall. At night, the constellations have not changed their positions, only their audience. Farmers read them first, sailors second, poets third, gods perhaps last of all, because they already know the lesson. That steadiness shining at a distance is better than nearness that flares and burns. The Milky Way keeps its long white assurance. The planets make their measured arguments. The moon remembers every phase with grace. Sleep comes. The old settles kindly into the new, the way a quilt settles on a bed, weight enough to reassure, not so much as to press. If you dream of sickles, let them cut grapes. If you dream of stones, let them be cornerstones. If you dream of crowns, let them be wreaths that smell faintly of hillside and keep the brow cool. Between Titan and Olympian lies only the work of calming power into service. The night approves and closes the book without a sound. Evening reaches the rock before the crowd does. The Acropolis is all shallow warmth and long shadow. Marble keeps the day like a folded letter, and the wind opens it a little, line by line. On the high ground a small tree lifts its silver leaves into the quiet, an olive that does not pretend to be large, and therefore has learned how to last. People will come and go. Offerings will change their bowls. Rules will be amended and amended back. The tree will remain, doing what trees do best, making shade, making fruit, making the air kinder to the chest. The old story remembers a contest Poseidon with a surge of water, or the gift of the horse Athena with a tree. Tonight we tell it in household terms. He offers speed, power, fascination. She offers use, endurance, peace. One gift has its victories in clamor. The other wins in kitchens, lamps, and patient hands. The city stands between sea and stone, and chooses the steady thing. Poseidon does not storm off. The harbor still keeps his tone. But the rock, with its temples and porches, keeps the olive's lesson close. Under the leaves everything is practical, and nearly sacred for being so. Oil in a shower lamp turns darkness into a kind of companion. Oil on bread makes the crust remember warmth. Oil on skin reports back to tired muscles with good news. Pits become new trees. Wood, when cut after long years, behaves like a gentleman, firm, fragrant, willing to hold its shape. The city, fed by this, learns a posture, shoulders lower, hands move more surely, speech shortens, and improves. Athena does not stand watch with spear high. Not tonight. She sits, perhaps, on the low wall where the tree's roots have made the stone a little uneven. Her attention is on small logistics where the loom should live so that winter light finds it. How far a bench should be from a hearth so that a person can both talk and turn the bread. Which alley wants a lamp, where the spring's trickle can be taught to make a thin, sweet thread of water for children to drink without climbing. Wisdom here is not an oracle. It is a layout. Below the rock, a street arranges itself. Presses turn the slow screw, the muscled beam, the steady drip. The day separates into what floats and what sinks. Golden liquid, pale water, a cake of pumice bound for fuel or animals that don't mind its bitterness. Workers wipe their hands and leave fingerprints on clay jars that will be found centuries later by other hands grateful for evidence that labor had shape and smell and was not always urgent. The amphorae breathe through their fired walls. The oil breathes too, quietly, perfectly at home, across town, in a courtyard with a line of cool shade. A mother rubs a bruise on a child's knee with a drop of olive and a patience learned from the tree itself. In a workshop, a carpenter dresses a plank that will soon be a table. The grain reminds him of rivers, and he cuts in the direction of the current. A weaver smooths a squeak from a loom by touching its heddles with a touch of oil. The thread begins to behave. The cloth remembers it is meant for comfort. Nothing is as dramatic as a storm. Everything is better on the heel again. The wind rises just enough to stir the silver of the underside of leaves. The tree makes a sound like fine rain though the sky is dry. A priest sets out a bowl that earlier held grain and now holds light. It reflects the branches in its shallow well. A small lens links once with immense authority and decides the hour is correct. Below, in the darker streets, lamps find their places, one at a threshold, one at a stair turn, one on a windowsill where a grandmother is about to tell a story that does not require monsters to keep a child listening. The city learns to keep records of kindness. Door lintels are lowered a finger width to spare the tallest heads. Steps are smooth at the edges so sandals know where to fall. A public bench exists exactly where the sun is a little too enthusiastic at noon and where evening becomes a friend. A guard carries oil in a small horn to quiet a hinge. Peace keeps better when hinges do. This too is Athena's work. The art of making a day unremarkable in the way that makes people strong. As for Poseidon, he remains in partnership. Ships that carry amphorae sit to his tune. Harbors rock them to sleep. Ropes creak like agreeable animals. Sail is cloth with opinions, but the sea persuades it. They arrive at a mood that pleases both. The olive and the wave become a truce written in trade routes, and in the way people's shoulders broaden from work that is worth doing. The god of the harbor and the goddess of the hill exchange a nod visible only to those who notice how cities survive. Festivals arrive not to disturb this order but to praise it. A wreath of olive fits every brow that has done an honest day. Runners finish and do not boast. The laurel knows what pride should cost and what it shouldn't in the shade of the tree. A poet reads a short line that makes sense to everyone present, because it was pulled from a stock of sense that belongs to everyone. Olive plates shine. Olives gleam. Someone pits 3 with a pen and drops them into a cup for a person who has been too busy helping to have a free hand. This is a city that remembers to feed its helpers. Night lengthens. The rock lowers its breathing to the city's pace. The city lowers its breathing to the rocks. On a parapet, a guard lifts a lamp and sees that it needs only a little oil to carry until dawn. The olive provides. In a room nearby, a woman rubs a thread of oil into a wooden spoon, and it will not splinter for another decade. In another, someone writes a letter by lampsheen, and the words are measured and kind. The tree keeps its counsel as trees do. If you sleep under an olive, you wake with the taste of a good plan in your mouth. Not conquest, not spectacle maintenance. A list that begins with fill the lamp, mend the strap, check the hinge, and ends with share bread. Athena does not ask for temples only. She asked for well-placed stools, for strong jars, for water that knows its path, for a map of shade. She asked for a gift that renews itself. The tree nods, leaf by leaf. In the morning, when the first footfalls climb the rock, the olive is already awake, which is to say it never slept in the way that people sleep. It has been busy turning light into patience, water into fruit, wind into news the branches can understand. People will come to look past it at marble. Some will turn and notice the small trunk that made the grand building a home. Those who do will carry away the more useful lesson, that cities, like trees, are made to endure by the quiet arch root branch shade fruit, and the discipline of not making a fuss when a breeze is enough. The road to Delphi rises in patient turns, and each turn teaches the breath to be kinder. Below you orchards ripple in silver where olive leaves turn their pale sides to the light. Above you Parnassus keeps its white shoulders cool. A spring voices itself in stone. The Castalia quiet enough to be water, firm enough to be guidance. Travelers rinse their hands and failings there. Both run off in the same narrow stream, and go work on rocks instead of hearts. The temple does not leap into view. It gathers. Columns, pale as almond milk, stand with the particular ease of things that know exactly how much weight they must bear. The porch gives you a shallow rectangle of shade, and a few words someone chiseled a long time ago and never regretted. Know yourself. Nothing in excess. They are not orders. They are the geometry of balance. The floor is slightly cool. The air under the roof is the kind that makes a reed pen think the letter will go well. Laurel keeps company at the edge. Leaves turning small coins in a breeze that smells faintly of resin, and the bee's good work. A priest ties a new strip of cloth to a branch, not to impress the tree but to remember a steady promise. Somewhere, a goat tests a stone with its hoof and decides it will not slip. The mountain is full of such decisions, small, local, helpful. Inside the room's center is a measure, a low stone rounded by hands. The omphalos, a navel for a world that needed one. It is not grand. It is exact. Nearby, a tripod waits with the patience of a stool that has already outlived several kinds of fashion. The Pythia sits when she is ready. No rush. Just the posture a long question requires. Laurel in hand, feet grounded, she listens until her listening becomes the room's listening. When she speaks, it is not thunder. It is a door opening just far enough to let a single, correct sentence through. Oracles are often remembered as riddles. Tonight they are housekeeping. Do not put out more chairs than the house can greet. Mend the roof in fine weather. Keep the well lighted if the wind is up. Let the eldest speak first. Let the youngest carry the loaf. If your road forks, choose the one where shade arrives at midday. If you must take the other, carry water. Even kings are improved by such advice. So are bakers, fishers, and the women who keep the accounts of kindness. Who was brought soup? Who needs a new hinge? Who has a daughter with a real gift for counting? Apollo is here without fanfare. The lyre rests along a low step. An extra string curls in a ring like a sleeping question. The god's sunlight is refined by stone into something drinkable. His arrows have turned into straight lines of thought for the hour. Decisions that keep edges and do not cut. Judgments that spare pride by being exact rather than loud. Somewhere a swallow writes its small glyph under the eaves, and the roof accepts it as a signature in the correct ink. A honey cake is left in thanks. The bees know the path that brought it. They will take that memory back to their dark, good city and spend it on wings. Smoke from a little bowl of laurel leaves goes up in polite braids and becomes instruction written in air. Inhale, hold, exhale, rest. A boy tasked with sweeping does not try to make silence. He joins it, and the broom's soft rhythm fits inside the room's larger one without scuffing its edges. Stories come softer here. The tale of Daffy is not a chase tonight. It is a lesson in shape, how a person can become a tree and therefore shade, and how a tree can become a crown and therefore restraint. The tale of Python is not a battle. It is housekeeping, again, the clearing of a damp place so that advice can dry properly before it is used. Even the gods' victories are maintenance. If you have brought a question, the temple will hold it for you until it is lighter. You will not receive a map. You will receive a habit. Stand where you can see a long way in more than one direction. Carry a sprig of green when you must enter heat. Listen for water before you go thirsty. Sit down before you are tired if a good stone offers. You will leave with less urgency and better errands. Outside, the path along the terrace tilts to a view that is almost a kindness too large to manage. The valley repeats itself in pale greens and silvers. The sea far off keeps a tempered glimmer. The sky behaves like a cloth someone took time to fold. A shepherd counts slowly, finger to finger, and the flock answers by being present in the correct number. A vendor of figs breaks one open and shows the inside to the day. Seeds gleam like a small constellation. A customer nods and buys to. Delphi is not for staying. It is for calibrating. You sit long enough that your breath adopts the rooms you need of measure. You rise when your shoulders remember their proper height. The road out is neither easier nor harder. It is more legible. The spring at the base says one last thing in water, which you understand perfectly without words. You take it to mean, go gently but go. When night folds itself back over the mountain, the columns keep their palos. The laurel keeps its coins. The omphalos keeps its round. The Pythia will sleep, and so will the goats and the bees, and the boy with the broom, and the god with the good aim. In your own sleep later, a sentence you didn't know you needed will arrive slowly like a breeze that has learned your name. It will say exactly as much as is useful, and then be quiet. The moon lifts like a cool bowl and pours itself through pines. Needles take the light in thin silver lines. The forest holds still without being stern. This is Artemis are the one in which steps decide to be soft, and edges remember they can be round. No hut tonight, only keeping of puffs, of nests, of the right distances between living things. A track leads inward the way a thought leads home. Moss smothers the argument from stones. Roots practice a gentle alphabet your feet can read without looking. Ferns lean a little as you pass, not to stare but to resume a breeze that paused when you arrived. Somewhere a creek edits itself around a fallen branch, and the water approves the revision. The air, taller here, smells of resin and cool bark. Sound moves in the key of listening. Artemis is present as an arrangement rather than an appearance, a bow unstrung and hung high where weather can do it no harm. A quiver set upright like a polite guest who knows when to keep silent. A handprint in fine dust on a rock where she sat a while and did nothing a little longer than most can manage. A white dog sleeps with one ear open, undecided about whether to call this watch or dream. Her breath matches the creaks. Animals keep their errands in courteous lines. A deer steps from dark to darker, and stops 3 times for the pleasure of being sure. A hare redraws the path from bramble to clover, and leaves the map folded neatly for dawn. Owls pronounce small vowels under the roof of leaves. Mice obey the punctuation. Bats stitch the upper air with thread you can't see but can feel if you stand very still. They end each line exactly on time. Light here is hospitality, not spectacle. It pools in clearings where grass decided to be short and patient. It braids itself through birch and beech and makes milky ladders for anyone who forgot a candle. Where it touches a spider web, the web does not perform. It receives, and for a minute the geometry shows its calm nerves. A snail's house becomes a small planet, and the path of the snail a galaxy you will not step on because you have all the time you need. Stories arrive shyly and behave better than they did in louder tellings. The memory of Actaeon is not a punishment tonight, only a lesson about thresholds, places where it is good to turn one's eyes and keep someone else's privacy whole. The hounds in this version sleep more than they run. When they run, it is after the idea of wind. Artemis, who could startle the world into sharpness, chooses instead to sand it to satin. A fallen branch loses its splinters. A thorn remembers it is also a leaf. If you kneel at the stream, insects will explain the art to you without raising their voices. Water striders draw invisible notes and read them back flawlessly. A trout the length of a hand tests a seam of current and rests in it like a sentence at the perfect comma. Stones keep their cool even in the bright parts. One is flat enough to be a plate, another cupped enough to be a bowl, another exactly the size of the thought you came here to put down. The forest is not empty of work. It is full of maintenance done gently. A branch relieved of its own weight by rot leans into moss that volunteered in advance. Dead leaves become soil with the same grace letters become words. A sapling exactly the width of your thumb holds a moondrop for a minute and then lets it fall. Somewhere a fox has cached 2 apples and will remember one of them. The rest of the remembering is delegated to roots. You pass a clearing that looks like a thought Artemis keeps for herself round, true and noun. At its edge stands a standing stone with lichen in the shape of a crescent. Someone long ago cut a notch that gathers moonlight as if it were water. Below it, a shallow basin rain will have its say, but not tonight. You leave the stone as you found it. Reverence in a good forest is mostly an agreement not to point. If you sit, the ground arranges itself on your knees like a patient animal. Your breath lengthens to match a pine's slow persuasion of the wind. You hear 2 distances at once, an owl very near, a small fall of water far enough away to be a memory. Between them is the heart's proper tempo. Worry, which likes corners and ceilings, finds neither here and steps out for air it cannot use. Somewhere, a stag lifts his antlers from a branch where he had been scratching and discovers he has decorated himself with a thin crown of twigs. He accepts the accident as a festival suited to one. A moth closes its wings on a bark that was her color before she chose it. A sprig of thyme, far from kitchens and kindness, wakes under your hand and enters the night with a promise it knows how to keep. Artemis' care is in distances well measured, between predator and prey, between step and nest, between curiosity and trespass. Paths stay paths, dens stay dens, water stays water. She has left small signs for those who walk without noise, a feather on a stump that points toward a bridge. 2 stones aligned where the ground needs a reminder to stay high. A scratch on a birch that looks like a letter from an alphabet that means not words but boundaries. The moon climbs 1 hand width and turns silver toward milk. Shadows fatten, then relax their edges. You find your way back without deciding to. The path has already chosen you. A nightier crosses the track and folds into a shape that is not bird but also not bird. You step wider and say nothing. The white dog raises her head once, confirms the inventory river, tree, person, all, and sleeps again. Leaving the forest is like setting down a book that kept time for you. The fields beyond look almost too open, but they will shrink to size by the 3rd pace. At the last tree you pause, and the tree finishes counting to a number it had started before you came. Artemis, who watched without watching, faintly nods in the way a wind nods, everywhere at once. No need for thanks, go safely. Later, lying down, you will find that your ribs move like the long lines of the Pathfinder over repeat. Your shoulders will remember the grammar of moss. Dreams will keep to the ethics of this place. They will approach, pause, turn their eyes when you ask, and leave a feather pointing you toward water, which is to say, toward the part of the night that answers slowly and well. Down where the path cools, and the air remembers stone, music learns how to walk. Orpheus does not hurry. His lyre is tuned to the temperature of night. Strings hold the kindness of fingers that have peeled fruit, tied knots, loosened knots, and learned the difference between insistence and care. The song is not a net. It is a light, small, steady, portable. He carries it because hands need work when the heart is working too. Eurydice is near in the way a calm thought is near, felt more than seen, present like shade at noon. The old versions tell of loss like a cliff. Tonight, the ground slopes. Nothing breaks. Everything turns. The underworld is not a spectacle but a quiet bureaucracy of departures and returns. Doors keep their hinges. Thresholds keep their manners. Footsteps learn to soften until they sound like agreement. Where rock narrows the way, water beads and waits. Where air cools more than the body prefers, the song adds one layer of warmth and moves on. Orpheus plays patterns that have practiced, not needing applause. Each phrase arrives, sits, and leaves room. Notes glance off walls and come back with a small echo that the ear translates into company rather than loneliness. Even the quiet inhabitants listen without leaning. A sentinel who has counted more hours than clocks know. A river that has perfected the art of not arguing with gravity. A small gate whose latch understands the difference between force and invitation. The song is an invitation. The place remembers how to host. Hades hears, but not as a king. As a custodian who likes a clean corridor and appreciates a tune that knows how to turn corners. Persephone hears the way a gardener hears rain, professionally pleased, privately moved. When the couples speak, their words are plain. No thunder, no bargains dressed in robes. Let them pass, says one voice that has kept rules for long enough to know when rules serve best. On a condition, says the other, not to punish but to keep shape. Walk forward. Do not turn. A condition is a frame. Frames help hands. Orpheus thanks the gate with a chord that sounds like a nod. He begins the walk upward. The song changes keys to low, but now with the kind of brightness that knows not to glare a narrow place. Eurydice follows with the footfalls of someone who has learned to trust a path by smell and temperature. She does not speak, neither does he. Words jostle in tunnels. Music travels better. It is a long climb, measured not by distance but by the number of times air warms and cools and warms again. At each bend, the urge to turn carries its old argument. Certainty feels kinder than trust. Orpheus answers by breathing. 4 steps on one breath, 4 on the next. A small rest while the lyre says the simple thing again. The strings do not assert, they repeat. Repetition is partly rest. The path agrees and levels for a stretch, as if grateful to be reminded. Behind, Eurydice keeps a pace that matches his breath without trying. Presence has its own acoustics. Leather finding stone, cloth choosing silence instead of rustle. The mild ring of a hairpin testing a curl and deciding to stay. She thinks of a meadow she liked and files the thought carefully where it will not snag the present moment. She thinks of his hands and does not reach. The constraint is not cruelty. It is the shape of the agreement that lets them travel together now, halfway, whatever halfway means, in a place that measures by patience. Orpheus's song finds a quieter register still. He plays for his hands, and for the stones that want to know who walks on them, and for the air that will need to carry breath past the next bend. He does not play for the future. The future is a slope. Slopes are best walked by noticing one step, and then the next. A drop of water lands on his wrist. The lyre keeps its pitch. The skin keeps its promise to feel. If there are guardians, they are busy with their own maintenance. A great dog asleep with an ear that opens and closes like a door at the right times. A ferryman counting oar strokes to keep muscles even. A clerk of shadows matching names on a list to names spoken softly at a desk. None object. Good music is good order. Good order is their work. One of them, not looking up, says, "Go well," And the cave answers with a second go well because rocks like to be helpful when addressed politely. Close now to light. The way tightens once more, as if to test whether the hands remember what was agreed. Orpheus continues to play. The melody is small enough to slip between ribs, and big enough to cover two people. He is tired, and tired tastes like turning. But there are other flavors. Laurel in the air from high places. The faint salt of a sea that has been freshened by springs. The mineral truth of stone that has never lied. He lets those do some of the work. The mouth of the passage appears as a softness first, then as a color the tunnel cannot make, then as a shape. Trees stand outside like patient relatives with good coats. The wind carries a rumor of bees. Orpheus steps into the light and stops where the shadow's edge keeps a cool slice for him. The condition remains. He does not turn. He plays one more phrase that sounds like a hand extended backward without moving. The path behind breathes. Footsteps near. He waits. You know the story as a heartbreak that punctures like a thorn. Let it be tonight a lesson about timing. Turning is not wrong. Turning early is wrong for this one task. Orpheus's shoulders argue with his heart. The heart wants to see. The shoulders know the rule. He holds still until the song itself, tired, honest, arrives at its last note. The cave sends it back in a small echo, which falls into his chest and says, "Now." He turns then, and only then. In this telling, there is no vanishing. There is a meeting like the meeting of two breaths that have been climbing the same hill from opposite sides. Eurydice arrives into the slice of shade and steps into the light. Their eyes adjust together. The same wind touches both faces. The same mild astonishment passes between them like a cup of water being handed across a threshold. The condition was never a trap. It was a rhythm to keep them both alive while crossing a place that respects only rhythm. They do not rush back to crowded rooms. They sit first, because sitting is useful after difficult agreements. Orpheus leans the lyre against a stone that knows how to hold instruments. Eurydice loosens a pin and lets a small thing fall and be found again. Above them, the day behaves. Clouds keep to their lanes. The sun remembers that glare is an error. A hawk reads thermals like a careful student and pauses without insisting on a lesson. The world, pleased by the correct confusion of a condition, sets out a banquet of ordinary, fine, water, bread, shade, later days oars. Depending on how clocks enjoy our stories, they will teach others the trick they learned, how to carry someone's presence forward without dragging, how to walk first and trust second, and then let trust walk ahead, how to pick a pace that sings. They will teach the part about waiting exactly long enough. They will teach, above all, that songs are for carrying light where words cannot go, and that the best songs do not claim the rooms they pass through. They arrange them and leave them better. If there must be a darker version somewhere, there often is. Let it sit in another house tonight, behind another door. Here, the path has allowed kindness, and the condition has been honored. The lesson is not do not look, but do not hurry the right look. The heart can learn that. So can the hands. So can feet walking on stone. When sleep finds you, it will hum the simplest figure of this melody. 4 steps on a breath, and 4, and rest. A hand extended behind the back without turning. A slice of shade that catches two people at once. You will turn toward what you love at the hour that loves to be turned toward and not before. And the morning will keep the tune, soft and exact, for later. Morning finds the threshing floor and decides to be helpful. Barley in its straw-colored coach leans toward sacks. Figs on trays accept the slow mathematics of sun. A clay jar, stoppered with clean cloth, remembers where last year's olives learned patience. Demeter's hand is everywhere and nowhere at the hinge of a granary door that swings without complaint. In the clean sweep of a yard where grain can be tossed into a mild wind and become lighter. In the calm nod a farmer gives when the sky says yes with a high, dry blue. Far below this ordinary day lies a room that keeps shade correctly. The door is not iron. It is respect. Hades minds his house as a careful steward minds a cellar, jars labeled corridors quiet, footsteps soft on good stone. Persephone, when she is here, walks as a person does who knows her schedule and agrees with it. The old telling sharpens grief to a blade. Tonight, let it be a calendar months arranged like clean plates, some at the table, some in the cupboard, all belonging to the same meal. Seeds understand this better than anyone. In autumn, they take the world's trust and lie down with it. Soil folds around them like a blanket that has learned the trick of keeping both warmth and breath. Above, Demeter closes shutters on orchards, tucks vines against their trellises, and teaches fields how to rest without feeling unemployed. Below, Persephone learns the names of stones and the temperature of silence. She walks the cool holes and remembers routes, which are themselves travelers between the two houses. When she goes up, she does not burst. She arrives with the same courtesy as dew. A hillside the color of memory develops green valves. Almond trees read the early chapter of spring aloud and find no errors. Lambs discover that running in a small circle is a sufficient theology. Demeter lifts a hand and the hand becomes weather, a decent rain at the correct time, a dry spell arranged to spare the harvest a heavy mood. In the corners of courtyards, baskets are brought out and mended. A string is replaced on a sieve. A child is shown which path to the well will not scold shoes. There are the seeds, yes, the pomegranates, careful rubies, counted and agreed upon. In some houses the story says 6, in others fewer or more. In all of them it means this: a portion of the year belongs to shade so that the rest may belong to light. Agreement is the architecture. Love is the furniture arranged inside it, chairs set where conversation falls more easily, a cup placed where a hand will find it in the night. The fruit stains a thumb. A napkin lifts it away. The point, as always, is not stain or cloth but the kindness of the hand between them. Work changes tea with her steps. While she is below, people mend nets, fences, stories. They visit lightly. They add wood to the dry corner of the shed. They learn soups. While she is above, people plant beans in friendly lines, barley in wide handwriting, onions tucked like commas between sentences of soil. Repetition proves itself to be partly rest. Demeter's festivals arrive to praise the cycle without scolding the parts that look like waiting. Loaves scored with neat stars remember fields. Wreaths remember vines. Someone puts a warm loaf in a neighbor's arms because that is how the gods prefer to be flattered. Hades keeps his end as well. In winter, he is not the thief of joy. He is the librarian of quiet. He lends hours for sleeping long and returns them in health. He sets lamps at intervals in the mind's corridors so that dreams will not lose their way and fear will not raise its voice. He minds the keys and learns not to rattle them. When Persephone speaks of the upper air, he listens, a good host making a note. More birdsong on the stair, perhaps. A sprig of myrtle near the threshold so the first breath feels friendly. The meeting of mother and daughter needs no trumpets. A field answers instead. Wheat lifts its 1,000 narrow hands. Poppies practice read along the margins, as if they were punctuation for gratitude. Bees postpone quarrels and get on with fair work. Persephone steps into the light, and the light steps toward her. Demeter's mouth relaxes into the shape of enough. They do not discuss eternity. They discuss where to spread the cloth for bread and cheese. Whether the hill or the fig shade will be more honest with the noon. If you listen with the right ear, you can hear the calendar turn like a page, not loud, not secret, just the small, persuasive sound of paper moving toward what comes next. Equinoxes click into place with a craftsman's pleasure. Solstices bow in the long doorways of the year and keep their hands folded. The flock learns its shorter and longer routes. A shepherdess marks each change by moving a stone to fingers to the left on the wall, an old practice. Never foolish. There is a little sorrow. Always, when the path turns down again, but is scaled to human bodies. Persephone gathers what must return with her, a handful of dried thyme to perfume the memory of kitchens, a ribbon that has learned the shape of her braid, one story from a child that will be used later when halls grow longer. Demeter inventories the jars, measures the grain not with panic but with aplomb, and sets aside seed for spring with a small smile that belongs to people who trust their own hands and the good behavior of seasons. Winter, under her care, is not harsh. It is exact. Fields wear their linen and sit like dignified elders. Rain keeps its small promises to cistern, and spring, snow, when it comes, remembers to silence the yard where silence is due. Lamps take their share of evenings. Letters are written by that light to people who will be pleased to receive them. The hearth speaks in a grammar of pop and sigh. The house is not a fortress. It is a ship at harbor, ropes snug, crew resting, heel sure. When Persephone returns again, everyone knows by smaller announcements than trumpets. The first lark pretends it was there all along. A ditch that was a problem becomes, under the right sun, a mirror. Wheels begin their neat arguments with axles. Markets revive their pleasant arithmetic. Hands open windows and let the whole day in without asking for references. The ear, having learned to breathe, models the lesson to every chest within sight of a hill. If you sleep with this story in the room, your breath will take its cue from it. Inhale with the sowing, exhale with the harvest. Shorter breaths for the quick work of summer, longer for the patience of winter. A held breath where frost gleams, and you are deciding whether to step. A comfortable sigh where shade finds you in June. You will not wake impatient with the dark nor careless with the light. You will keep both properly, as a good household keeps bread, some for today, some for tomorrow, a little for the neighbor, and a crumb for the birds. Morning keeps its hand flat over the Aegean, smoothing small tempers into long, agreeable lines. White houses on a cliff wake without complaint. Steps remember their many useful purposes, up, down, and pausing to look farther out. The sea is a careful grammar of ripples and light. If there is a lesson today, it will be given in the tone of a patient teacher with chalk on the cuff. Daedalus is at his bench early, not because urgency demands it, but because wood and fiber behave best before the sun speaks too boldly. His tools are the quiet, faithful kind, a knife that prefers clean cuts to fast ones, and all that understands circles a length of flax cord with a memory for knots. Feathers are sorted by mood rather than size, calm ones for the leading edge, steadier ones for the trailing line, a few with a playful curve kept aside for when the craft requires a smile. Wax warms in a low bowl near the window, taking the light the way bread takes honey, slowly, with gratitude. Icarus arrives like a breeze that has decided to be a person for the day. He lifts a handful of feathers, puts them down, lifts the cord, sets it back, his curiosity learning the ethics of benches. Daedalus nods toward the stool that has already learned the shape of the boy's knees. They work beside each other without much talking. The wings will be a conversation. Words would only crowd the room. There is no plan here for conquest, only for crossing. The island has been kind, and kind has borders. The mainland waits with its own kind promises. Between them lies water with good manners, provided you do not lecture it. Daedalus aligns a shaft with a stringer and tests the bend. Icarus watches the string show its patience and the wood show its will. He learns that a structure is not a sermon, it is an agreement written jointly by materials and hands. Wax enters the story with the humility of something that knows it is temporary and is therefore careful. It does not shout, it seals. Feathers smooth into it and find that they are more themselves when they have company. The frame grows an edge and then a surface. The surface, when stroked, answers with a promise of lift that is not boast, only physics done politely. Daedalus checks each join the way a shepherd counts finger to feather, nod, next. If the old sharp version of the tale whispers about heights and falls, this one chooses distances and returns. Daedalus points up the map the morning has made, the line of cool air above the water. the brighter line above that where the day gathers itself, the high pale emptiness where a gull is an asterisk against a sentence nobody needs tonight. He draws with his finger as if on the boy's shoulder blades. Here you will be light. Here you will be patient. Here you will prefer shade. They practice on a low bluff where thyme keeps its small promises, and goats ignore everything that is not a useful plant. Straps are adjusted until they forget to be straps. Icarus learns the weight of his new width, not heavy, unfamiliar. The wind is a tutor who refuses to grade, only to coach. Knees soften. Ankles remember sand. Arms learn to be not arms but levers. The first hop is unimportant. The second is a correction. The third is a line the body writes without needing to look at its hand. Flight, when it offers itself, does so not in a trumpet but in a quiet yes. Ground falling away by a courteous finger's breadth, ere turning from resistance into something like consent. Icarus does not shoot upward. He floats outward, then up the fifth distance of a gull's wing, then along the cliff where heat speaks the old words to arise here, turn here, rest against the rock's shoulder. Daedalus is there, a small figure below, not tiny for long, keeping the boy with a steady palm of voice. Good, good, now ease. Now lean. They go out when the day is not yet harsh, and return when the light begins to show off. Wax softens under unkind sun. They do not ask it to be brave beyond its nature. The aim is not demonstration. It is repetition, until repetition becomes the sort of rest that can carry you across a narrow sea without wearing the heart thin. Out, up, along, back. The wings learn their own manners. The sea keeps the practice private, busying itself with a pattern of silver coins that never need counting. On the day itself, they do not announce the day. Bread, a little water. To figs, leave light, rive light. The harness speaks its final advice. The wax tests the air like a cat tests a step. The feathers share a glance and decide they are ready to be a collective. Daedalus meets Icarus's eyes and finds not daring but appetite for horizon, for the small bravery of doing one careful thing correctly many times in a row. They walk to a ledge the sea has kept for good departures. Departure is simply a continuation of practice. Lift into the kind lair. Watch for the bright band, avoid it. Listen for the low hum that means the air approves your angle. The island becomes a thought you will have again. The water spreads its agreeable pages. Distance commits. Icarus discovers that staring is mostly breathing arranged into shoulders. A gull joins for a minute and leaves the way useful teachers leave early, while the lesson belongs to the student. Midway, the world offers its soft distractions. A high hard light winks like a coin you don't need. Heat builds a ladder and invites you up with the promise of views you cannot keep. Icarus feels the pull and answers it as he would answer any stranger selling urgency, with a smile, a shake of the head, and a sentence about errands. He chooses the river of air that moves forward without bright talk. The wax keeps its courtesy. The feathers keep their low voice. There is a point at which you know you will arrive. It is not the sight of a harbor, though a harbor is there, doing its imitations of welcome. It is the way the body relaxes one notch, and grip becomes contact. Icarus lowers by the width of a question mark, and the water applauds as water does, with 100 small hands. Daedalus angles it slightly higher, matching the boy's path so that landing will be to people sharing a sentence rather than to sentences trying to rhyme. Feet touch sand with the surprise that follows any good plan. Oh, it worked. Of course it worked. Straps are loosened. The wings lie down and become tools again. Wax keeps its dignity by holding the last feather until the last hand asks it gently to let go. Icarus laughs once, not because of triumph but because everything is in its proper place. Sky where sky should be. Ground where ground should be. Father where father should be. Breath where breath is best kept. The rest of the day is maintenance disguised as celebration. They oil the frame lightly and set it in shade. They put water into themselves and into the small clay jar that holds a sprig of thyme rescued from the ledge. They tell the story to a curious fisherman exactly, without exaggeration. He nods as men nod who have mended nets for years. Good craft, good weather, good sense. He offers bread. They accept. The sea continues to behave. Later versions will prefer the spectacle, the glare, the fall, the moral bright as a market shout. Let this one prefer the steadier moral that sleeps better. Measure, practice, timely shade, listening. The danger was not the sky. It was forgetting the nature of wax and the nature of afternoons. Icarus remembered both, and so the wings remembered him. Daedalus, who has taught many things to many materials, is pleased to have taught timing to a day. If you keep this story by your bed, it will turn your dreams into reliable weather. You will find yourself choosing the kind layer in conversations. You will angle away from bright talk that melts joints. You will eat before effort and rest before fray. When a ladder of heat invites you to climb for the sake of climbing, you will wave politely and keep to your horizon. And if you must cross, you will cross early, with tools that like you and a friend whose voice fits the wind. When night comes, the wings hang quiet. Their shadows on the wall make to gentle boat shapes, heading the same direction. Wax sleeps, and will be ready again when morning lies straight across the water. The sea smooths its grammar once more. In the darkness, a gull dreams of a boy who flew correctly and thinks well of the world. The sea brings you to Crete the way a kind sentence brings you to its period and hurried correct. Knossos breathes in square courtyards and long corridors. Paint on walls keeps bulls and dancers in friendly motion. Pillars like dark reeds hold up rooms that prefer shade to show. Somewhere below or within, whichever word suits a house with many middles, a path folds over itself until it becomes patient. People call it a labyrinth. Tonight it is simply a place where corners ask to be taken kindly. Ariadne knows this house as a person knows a poem learned by walking it. She has counted the steps between light wells, listened to the way air cools on certain turns, memorized which bricks collect salt from the sea breeze and which stay sandy. A spool sits in her hand, not heavy, the size of a good apple, and the thread upon it keeps the color of wheat that has just decided toward gold. She offers it to Theseus without ceremony, as one offers bread. Here, take use. Return with something softer in your face than worry. Theseus is not thunder in this telling. He is a traveler with a decent pair of shoes and the sense to test the balance of a step before trusting it with his weight. He takes the thread and ties it to the first honest thing, a column that has been greeting light for several centuries, and knows how to keep a promise. The knot he makes is not dramatic. It is the sort a fisherman would approve, the sort that comes undone easily when asked, and otherwise keeps its oath. The labyrinth receives him with the quiet competence of a library. Carters hold their cool. Plastered walls remember color, even where paint has become an idea. The floor keeps a record of sandals and bare feet, and paws, some small, some large, none worth panicking about tonight. Theseus pays attention to the work at hand. One hand keeps the line, the other meets the wall lightly it turns. Breath is counted into useful lengths, 4 for the walk, 4 for the ease, and sometimes 6 when the path is level enough to permit generosity. The thread hums through his fingers like a friendly instrument. Ariadne does not wait idly. She listens from the doorway, palm on stone, learning the tempo of the thread leaving her. She feels when it plays out faster, some corner where curiosity made the feet quick, and when it slows, some tiny chapel of light where standing still felt right. She lets the spool turn with the grace of a wheel that likes its axle. If warrior Ives, she shows it the sea and perhaps a small fig torn neatly into. Worry, reminded of sweetness, becomes something she can put in her pocket until it behaves. Inside, the heart of the place is a good question rather than a threat. The Minotaur waits in a room that the sun visits only as a rumor, a room that smells of straw and a little salt, and the faint, remembered air of a courtyard above. He is neither war nor riddle. He is a creature whose body has learned many kinds of quiet. He has known echoes longer than most people know patience. When Theseus arrives, he does not raise a weapon. He raises the thread so that light from the doorway can find it and make of it a small river leading outward. They stand breathing and let the room introduce them. The Minotaur's breath is big but calm. Theseus's is smaller, newly trained. Between them, the thread maintains its usual tone, practical, unafraid of distance, good at its job. Theseus speaks first, the way one addresses a watchful animal at the edge of a field. He says a soft inventory of harmless things, step, corner, water, light, words that make rooms more possible. The Minotaur tilts his great, careful head and answers with a shift of weight that means not danger, only doubt. Night versions of this story put iron and speed in the air. Tonight's version brings bread and time. Theseus sits, not close, not far, and unwinds a coil to span the space between them. He sets down a piece of bread on the middle of the line. The Minotaur watches, then takes it with a patience that suits big hands. Straw answers to the shift and remembers. A bowl of water, coaxed from a niche at the wall where stone keeps a little cool, is set down in the same manner. The room becomes a table the length of a thread. They do not bargain. They practice coexistence. Theseus explains the thread how it remembers exits and offers companionship to people who would otherwise practice getting lost. The Minotaur considers the ethics of such a thing and approves without enthusiasm, which is the best kind of approval. He rises, stretches in the slow animal way that forgives bones, and takes a step that moves no air more than necessary. The thread shifts and does not complain. On the return, the labyrinth is the same and also better. Corners have changed from questions into commas. The Minotaur follows not as danger follows, but as a student follows a teacher who walks beside rather than ahead. Some turns ask for careful thinking. They provide opportunities for agreement. When a choice appears, Theseus lays the line in one direction and waits. If the Minotaur prefers the other way, some inner map insisting, Theseus listens and tries it. The thread, busy with its quiet mathematics, keeps both options available until one shows itself to be kinder. Back near the living level of the house, the air keeps the day's warmth in its palms and offers it to faces. The Minotaur pauses at a shaft of light not meant for him and studies dust like a new species of bird. Ariadne's hand on the first column feels the thread arrive in her skin one moment before it arrives under her eyes. She does not exclaim. She makes room. Sometimes salvation is simply a woman who has already found a cool job and a second cup. Here is a secret the version with weapons does not tell. Labyrinths improve when you add more exits. Ariadne knows a quiet court near the storeroom that opens onto a sheet path and then onto a strip of scrub that keeps its own counsel. Together they walk that way, Theseus, Ariadne, the Minotaur, at a pace that makes sense to three bodies of different sizes. In the small court, a bench learned by shade invites sequence. Sit, water, bread, the gentler kind of looking. Beyond, the sheet path does what sheet paths do best. Exit the problem without making a speech. The Minotaur does not flee. He relocates to a low fold in ground where thyme and rock argue softly, where caves are little and belong to foxes, where shade keeps its personal schedule, and no one has asked it to attend ceremonies. He lies down. The earth remembers larger animals. This makes the earth generous. From time to time he will come to the edge of fields after dusk, and tidy fallen sheaves with those careful hands. People will speak of a creature in the hills who has learned to keep to himself and to be useful when the moon is pale. No one will chase. No one will count. The thread has taught the countryside a policy. Let be. Knossos does not empty. It breathes more truly. The corridors remember. The afternoon Theseus walked them without breaking them. Ariadne moves through her house with a spool that now holds air rather than worry. She ties new lines where they will help, one from Bath to Tull for an elder whose steps are shorter, one along steps that go steeply down to a storeroom, one across a courtyard on festival nights so children learn patiently where dancing begins and ends. The thread turns into policy and then into culture, as good tools do. Theseus thinks of ships, not to leave, not yet, but to consider how lines become roots. He has learned that oars are a kind of thread, that wake is a kind of remembering water does, that harbors are knots making shore and sea responsible for each other for a night. His hands, having held the simplest of technologies, find new respect for rope and seam, and the place a mast stands when it understands the wind. If you require a farewell, let it be quiet. Ariadne's palm learns the size of Theseus's shoulder as one learns the weight of a pitcher meant to pour without spilling. The Minotaur's shadow moved once across the hill above, and is gone into the gentle geometry of dusk. The thread no longer tuck becomes necklace, then cord around a bundle of bread, then line for a child's toy whose flights are low and satisfying. Functional is a kind of sacred. What remains for telling is the craft, how to knot so that release is possible, how to choose thickness so that a line will speak through fingers without cutting them, how to wind a spool so it pays out evenly in the dark. Ariadne teaches this to anyone who asks. She includes, as lessons often forget to, the ethics. Do not tie where consent is not present. Do not lay lines that lead people where they did not mean to go. Do not claim credit for a path that a place taught you. Theseus adds the field notes. Keep one palm free for the wall. Turn your head before the corner. Hum if you can. Eat before you're lost. If children ask about monsters, adults point to duties. Feed the creatures that keep to their roams. Leave bowls where night walkers can find water. Set lamps farther apart than you think and brighter than you would like, so that maps bloom in the eyes. Fear becomes an animal you can pat and send to its corner. The house does not claim to be safe. It claims to be maintained. That is the stronger promise. The sanctuary comes on softly, like a hand on a warm forehead. Cypress and pine keep their tall hush. Cicadas reduce their course to a modest thread so the air can be understood. White stones mark the way, not to impress, but to reassure. Here, then here, then here. A small spring speaks in the correct register for tired minds. You dip your fingers. They return cooler and a little more persuaded. Epidaurus is a village of calm purposes. The stole along one side is long enough for walking without thinking, shaded for thinking without walking. In its shadow, benches offer the geometry that backs prefer. A priest in linen moves like a breeze with errands. A basin set where it will catch light. A bundle of clean reeds for writing, a folded cloth placed at the foot of a couch that was already polite. No one hurries. Much is accomplished, that you have come not for spectacle but for sleep, the old, careful kind, the kind that Asclepius keeps in jars with labels written in kindness. Incubation, they call it, a night spent in a hall that teaches rest like a language. The healer's house is simple. Pale pillars, cool floor, a low lamp for each couch, and near every pillow the offering of water that has learned to mind its own sound. Snakes live here, sacred and well-behaved, an emblem of turning and returning, shedding and renewing. You will not be asked to be brave, only to be present. Before the night, there are simple rites designed to subdue worry into agreement. Oil touches the temples with the same gentleness used on a frightened foal. A sprig of laurel is placed where the head will lie, not for magic so much as for scent. Bread is eaten, nothing heavy. Honey enough to convince the air it will be sweet. Then a short walk under the pines, 3 dozen steps to tell the body what distance means here near, what height means here human, what silence means here friendly. Asclepius is invoked without trumpets. A reed pen records your name and your errand in a neat hand. Writing is itself a small spell that arranges the heart. A priest reads what you have said back to you and trims it gently until it fits on one line. To sleep without fear, to wake without pain, to be shown where the knot is and how to loosen it. The god, who makes a profession out of listening, receives the summary as a good doctor does, with attention, not drama. Inside the abaton, the sleeping porch, the air has a coolness that minds its manners. Lamps make small islands of gold. Beyond them lies an archipelago of shade. You choose a couch. The couch accepts you. A clean sheet is drawn up. Your feet are covered because feet tell the truth quicker than the rest of the body and deserve respect. A snake inspects the owl, tastes the night with its tongue, and slips into a carved crack in the wall like a ribbon being put away. The lamp on the far pillar blinks once, and sleep, when it comes, is supervised by nothing louder than breath. It arranges itself in stages that feel like rooms. The first where inventory is taken and harmlessly set down. The second where distant water speaks. The third where a well-known hand draws a line across the brow and says enough. In the fourth, the god visits as a courteous colleague, not a king. Sometimes as a physician in plain cloth. Sometimes as a dream of a dog who finds your pain and lies down upon it until it warms and loosens and leaves. Dreams here prefer practical metaphors. You may be shown a knotted rope and handed a bowl of warm water. You soak the knot. It understands. You may be asked to climb 3 shallow steps and then shown a fourth built at a better angle. You step onto it and discover your ankle knew the step before you did. You may be given a small, sleeping snake to hold. It breathes. Your breathing imitates it. The knot under your ribs imitates your breathing and forgets its job. Messages arrive in the kind of images a morning can remember without embarrassment. Some nights the god prescribes a sound. A flute in the next court plays a scale that includes forgiveness. The ear takes it in. The back muses upon it and releases 1 notch. Some nights he prescribes a plant, and the priest will leave a sprig of mint in your empty cup so that water, later, will remember to be green. Some nights he prescribes company, and a dog finds your couch and sleeps across your feet and convinces your mind that the world is watchful on your behalf. Not everyone is cured. Everyone is steadied. A woman whose grief lifted her shoulders to high leaves with a measure of weight added back to her arms enough to carry bread and lay it down. A man whose jaw governed his thoughts like a soldier wakes with teeth a fingertip apart and a taste of olive oil where anger used to live. A child who had forgotten to laugh finds a lizard by the path in the morning and smiles, as if tasked by a god to do so. There are day wards in this place as well. The theater down the slope belongs to the same medicine. Proportion, voice, breath. Sit there and the world's size gets corrected. Stage a human span, sky a generous dome, hills a stable backdrop. Actors teach the lungs to move. Choruses teach the feet to keep time with kindness. The mask teaches the face to rest while the voice does the work. Doctors of sleep send their patients to afternoon plays because laughter and weeping, measured in public, tidy the private rooms of the heart. If Asclepius speaks in daylight, it is through the staff with its coding reminder. Life returns to itself. Change is a circle drawn neatly. Leave room for the next skin. In the stoves the priests write down the dreams that solve themselves. I saw a spring and drank once. The pain left. I was told to sleep on my left side. I woke, and my right knee behaved. A snake touched my hand, and I remembered to forgive my brother. The tablets hang on nails and behave like a second grove wood with leaves of story. Evening returns with its good news. The pines remember what to do. The stones release a little stored sun right where feet appreciate it. The cicadas try a slower tempo to avoid tiring the air. The abaton is swept, sheet corners folded, lamps trimmed. Patients who will sleep here tonight walk slowly, already listening for their instructions. A priest pours water into a basin and the sound declares the hour open. When it is your turn again, you know the geography by heart. Bench, basin, door, lamp, couch. The healer meets you as if you were a colleague. In a way you are. You will do half the work yourself by lying still and letting breath act like a physician with quiet hands. The god provides the rest, a dream in clear grammar, an image not easily discarded, a sentence that sounds like your own voice but kinder, telling you to eat soup and to write the letter you have been resisting, to walk in shade and to move your pillow an inch. Morning at Epidaurus is famously modest. Birds write the sky with thin ink. The pines bless the light by letting it through in measured coins. A bell small, bronze reminds the sun to be agreeable. You wake with instructions that do not raise their voice. Drink, stretch, thank, return if needed. The snake, somewhere in the wall, has finished its round and rests. The priest writes a note for you, herb, a walk, a time to stop working each day. You nod, paid in usefulness. Leaving the sanctuary is like leaving a good clinic that refuses to make you dependent. The road underfoot behaves, the world looks the right size, and the hours agree to be stacked rather than jumbled. If pain returns, you will know how to speak to it in the language you learned. A cup of warm water, a shorter list, a shaded bench, the dog, a story, a breath. Sleep later will remember the baton and reconstruct it kindly. Pillar, lamp, clean linen, the sound of water. A snake that never frightens, a god who sits rather than looms. You will not need marble or pine to find the room. You will dim a light, place a glass where it will catch moon, lay a sprig of something green near your pillow, and breathe until listening begins. And if a dream arrives with a small instruction, you will write it down and obey the good, ordinary magic of following it. Night takes the hillside the way a shawl takes shoulders, familiar, helpful, exactly enough. The sea hushes to a long line. Time keeps a last, soft breath of green. Stones warm from the day release what they saved in careful, coin-sized portions. Someone tips a jug. The play answers with a cold lug that belongs to clean water, and no speeches. Above, the sky remembers its work and begins to name itself in light. You lie back on a low wall, spine learning the old geometry of marble and air. The stars do not rush to be seen. They collect, the way friends collect on a porch when no one needs to knock. First, 3 points you already know how to count: a belt, a simple road across a hunter's middle, Orion drawn with the restraint of a good outline. Off to the side, a small cluster like a handful of salt thrown carefully. The Pleiades, 7 or many, depending on the night and the patience of your eyes. The myths behind these patterns have big versions, chases, arguments, victories. Tonight they keep the volume correct for sleep. Orion is not hunting. He is standing where breezes cross, letting the belt carry the day's weight so his shoulders don't have to. The Pleiades are not fleeing. They are a family taking an evening walk, staying close enough to speak without raising voices. Between them, a faint pour, some night smoke, or a cloud that forgot to be loud. Your eye learns to soften, and the blur decides to be a cluster after all. You travel the dome by easy steps. Cassiopeia sits like a chair left out for cool air, depending on her mood and your latitude. A piece of furniture for stories to rest on. The Great Bear, big and legible, pours its dipper of dark along the north, then remembers to point. Follow the rim to the star that mines the tent, Polaris. A nail kindly tapped into night so travelers can hang their certainty from it. Cygnus, a cross of calm, lays a bright bar across the Milky Way as if to say, here is a bridge should you need one between thoughts. Andromeda does not strain on chains in this quieter telling. She is a ribbon of rooms, one star, then next, then a dim country that is not a star at all but another city of stars, far and full. Perseus is not brandishing. He is carrying water. Pegasus, half square, half idea, remembers the spring it made with a hoof and invites the mind to drink there. Aquila keeps a respectful distance. Lyra makes a diamond small enough to wear. The sky speaks in shapes the hand could draw on a table with crumbs and still be understood. You measure the world without instruments. Arm outstretched, one thumb erases a star, then gives it back. 2 fingers span Orion's belt and find that space obeys your reach without taking offense. Breath adopts the period of the night's grammar. Count 4 stars slowly and draw air. Count 4 and let it go. Between those counts lies a sprinkle of extras, meteors brief as good ideas passing through the room. Satellites with their steady, polite pace, planes scratching short-lived sentences nobody minds. Beside you, a friend names what you miss and misses what you name. and together you cover more sky than either could alone. The naming is not a quiz. It's a way of saying I am here with you in the same dark. A child's voice from farther down the stone says that Pleiades looks like a spoon of sugar spilled. An elder accepts the metaphor and improves it, a spoon of sugar carried carefully to sweeten something not yet in view. Both are correct. The cluster does not mind. The Milky Way, let it be a road tonight, not a story about cows or gods. A white, quiet path above the sea, running from one horizon to the other with the patience of a road that understands feet of many kinds. You can walk it with memory, this end over olive country where crickets practice wisdom by repetition, that end over islands that keep lighthouses and bakeries open at proper hours. In between, the small glitter that means more, always more, but not all at once. There is comfort in the sky's slow errands. The earth turns under you at the pace of forgiveness. Stars rise and set as if bowing to one another across distances that have learned courtesy. If you stay long enough, Orion will lean toward the sea like a man deciding to sit, and Cassiopeia will flip her chair to the other side of the pole without clatter. You will not notice the exact moments. You will simply find yourself breathing in a new key and approve the change. Some constellations teach navigation. Others teach proportion. Virgo lays out a field you cannot harvest and asks you to be content with the look of wheat. Scorpius keeps its curve low in some seasons, a signature practiced and put away. Sagittarius draws a teapot you cannot lift, and thus saves you from ambition. Capricorn traces a shape only slightly goat, only slightly fish, mostly human habit, to join to reasonable things and let them get along. If you prefer your myths in micro, read them closer to the ground. A snail carries its own galaxy in spirals you can measure with a fingertip. A dew bead on a blade of grass puts Orion on a plate for you. The plate shakes, the belt scatters, and then reforms when your hand stops laughing. A moth lands on your knee small as a comma, and you realize stories are only punctuation for the quiet between stars. Far out at sea, a boat slides across the black without needing blaze. Its mast points to a private north. Its wake is a temporary line on a page the sky will turn soon enough. In some houses, lights go down room by room, windows darkening like squares on a star chart where someone has finished the night's observation. The moon, if she is present, keeps her own opinions about glare and hides a while behind a thin shawl of cloud to let the smaller things speak. You could count meteors to sleep if you wanted, or you could count breaths. Either way, the numbers stay kind and do not demand to be remembered in the morning. The hillside supports you without supervision. The stone keeps a slow, even temperature. The air moves across your face and does not ask questions. The sky adjusts its quilt a little, tucking Orion's belt under one corner, straightening the line of Deneb to Altair to Vega, making sure the dipper will be where someone expects it when they need to go home. Before you rise, choose a private star, not the brightest, perhaps the one beside it, or the third in a line that usually goes unnoticed. Give it a job small enough to complete. Watch this roof. Keep an eye on that road. Be the punctuation for a wish you are not ready to say out loud. Stars are good at such assignments. They keep them without fuss and report without words. When you walk back, do not turn a light on your phone. Let the white stones and the low wall and the memory of your path do their work. Any misstep will be a soft one. Night has padded everything. The moon has arranged shadows where they will not startle. Doors sit patient at the edge of courtyards. Hinges remember to be discreet. Beds receive without conditions. If you wake later, the window will hold one square of sky where your chosen star will be performing its quiet task. Sleep has its own constellations, the freckles of breath along the ribs, the bright knots of muscle learning to din, the soft arch of a dream from one side of the mind to the other. Draw lines there as the Greeks did in the dark. Join, name, repeat, and the shapes will keep you. Orion becomes the triangle of Kilo, shoulder sheet. Pleiades becomes the cluster of kindly thoughts that meet whenever you need them and never arrive late. Morning loosens the knots in the hills and lays out paths as if unrolling ribbon. Stones take their places in a grammar your feet remember without thinking. Step, step, pause. Step, look, continue. Hermes keeps these roads the way a good host keeps a table, nothing showy, everything correct. His sandals rest by a doorway for a moment longer than needed, as if reminding haste that it is a guest here, not the owner. The road begins not with a gate but with a polite change in texture, packed earth learning the idea of company. Thistles lean back from the shoulder with a gardener's tact. Thyme and pennyroyal offer their small green signatures to the air. At the first rise you see what the road intends, a line that does not argue with the land, a promise that you can keep without being clever. Milestones do not boast. They stand at just the height a hand reaches when a person is thinking. Messages travel here in forms that do not startle. A folded cloth in a basket, a knot that means yes, another that means soon. A sprig tasted by the nose before being trusted by the tongue. Hermes Caduceus waits in the mind like a sketch, two threads in agreement, a staff that keeps the vertical honest. Snakes coil their imperfect courtesy, not to threaten, but to display the trick of turning and returning without getting lost out at a bend. A courier pauses under an olive and counts his breaths as if they were coins he means to spend wisely. The letter he carries is written on mulberry paper thick enough to forgive a thumbprint. The ink knows how to be black without shouting. The seal knows how to keep a secret without resenting it. He will reach the porch at the hour when shade is long and tea is honest. Hermes will have arranged the wind so that dust keeps its distance from a cup. Crossroads behave like libraries. Each arm of the intersection offers its subject in a low voice. River, town, orchard, ferry. The god keeps a small altar there, a flat stone with a few peeled reeds, a sprig of basil, pebbles stacked into a 5-stone certainty. Travelers add what they can spare, a fig cut neatly in two, a drop of oil, a sentence of thanks. In return, the road lends them better legs for an hour and a clearer errand for the rest of the day. You pass a shepherd whose flock edits the hillside in white commas. He raises two fingers in greeting the universal syntax of the path and asks if the spring still speaks beyond the tamarisk. You nod. News moves forward without urgency. That is Hermes' preference. A boy jogs past with a basket of bread that smells like instruction. He will deliver it to a grandmother who measures afternoons by crust rather than clock. The road keeps all these errands in its pocket without letting them clink. Bridges practice the gods' humility. No arches thrown for applause, only timber laid where water insists on its route. Rope with the memory of hands, a plank that has been oiled into kindness. You place your foot, and the plank agrees. Beneath, the stream says the syllables it always says, and is pleased to be understood. On the far bank, a small shrine has collected the day's dust and turned it into a thin patina of belonging. Hermes is, among other things, the patron of acceptable shortcuts, not the ones across crops or through someone's speech, but the little thread along a terrace that saves 5 minutes of dignity on a hot noon. He marks it with a white stone that any sparrow would notice. You follow it and gain shade, and the heat decides to teach somebody else a lesson today. The trick is not speed but tact. The road rewards it with an extra breath at the top of the hill. Messages are not only letters. A repaired handle left where the pot will be found is a message. A reed whistle hung on a nail says a child has been brave today. A ribbon tied to a fig branch promising, without any need for words, that someone remembered sweetness and left enough. Hermes inventories these without ledger. He prefers the arithmetic of footsteps and the accounting of smiles offered at correct intervals. Where the path skirts a town, markets converse in the language of measured clatter. The cobbler's all approves leather. A vendor lifts a cluster of grapes. The sun obliges. A coin passes. The road learns yet another fair exchange. The god, hat tipped low, is everywhere and nowhere helping a strap remember its hold. Persuading a hinge to quiet, teaching a new porter the honest angle at which a wait feels like work and not burdened out at noon. The road is humble and asks for water. A traveler pours from a skin into a shallow bowl for a dog who has been carrying courage in his tail all morning. Hermes writes the moment into the day like a line of good poetry, no need to underline. Under a plane tree, two women agree on directions using landmarks that will still exist next year. The stone that looks like a folded cloak, the wall that smells faintly of fennel, the gate that squeaks only in the evening. Afternoons invite the long errand. Here the god adds his best craft, pacing. To send a message is to choose a speed that keeps both the news and the messenger whole. Sandals learn the lesson. Straps that are too tight are loosened. Straps too loose are taught to sing a softer song against skin. Shade is rationed like kindness, frequently, in small portions, with intention. What must arrive arrives. What did not need to travel falls away and becomes tomorrow's better planned out as light lowers. Hermes practices his most affectionate habit, returning the traveler as well as the message. The last turns are drawn generously. The smell of mint escapes a doorway at exactly the moment the feet wonder whether home was a rumor. It was not. A threshold appears with its proper promise. Someone has put a pebble on the stair to remind the body to lift. And so you lift. The letter passes from one hand to another without drama. The seal makes its small, satisfying sound. The news lands in a room that knows how to hold it. Afterward, the road does not ask for praise. It asks only that you tell it tomorrow's errand when you know it, so that shade, wind, and timing can be arranged again. In the corner, Hermes sets his sandals side by side and smooths their straps with a thumb. The caduceus leans against a wall. The snakes regard each other with their polite, endless conversation. Up, down, turn, return. Nothing is solved forever. Everything is carried well enough. If you learn anything permanent here, let it be the etiquette of messages. Write short, fold neat, travel light, arrive kindly. Do not wake a house to prove that you care. Find the hour when the door already means to open. Do not carry gossip unless it has been transformed into help. When your own errand is over, stand at the crossroads for a minute longer than you need to and point someone else toward water. Night takes the road back into its wider map. Milestones cool. Bridges practice science. The god counts the day's arrivals by listening to kitchens. A knife set down in satisfaction. A cup refilled without being asked. A chair pulled for a latecomer. A laugh that could only have happened because the news was good enough. Hermes smiles the way a path smiles, by being ready again at dawn. Later, when sleep draws out its own roads, you'll find them paved in the same courtesy. Breath will carry its message from nose to chest to belly and return without spilling. Thoughts will take the acceptable shortcuts to rooms where answers sit with cups in their hands. If a dream arrives sealed, you will break it without tearing the paper, read what you need, and put it back carefully kept for morning, delivered on time. Evening gathers its dishes and puts them where night can find them. In the center of the room, a low fire holds steady, no spectacle, just orange patience. Hestia lives here the way warmth lives in bread, not seen so much as understood. The hearthstone remembers every meal and most of the conversations. If you pressed an ear to it, you would hear the arithmetic of yours: 1 ember, 2 sticks, 3 bowls, 4 chairs, adding up to enough. The room has learned her geometry. A circle of light, a square of table, a bench with a curve that forgives tired backs. Lamps cooperate with flame, not competing. The door stands where drafts decide to be useful rather than rude. The window is a small rectangle of sky that the moon borrows in fair weather. On the mantel, an unassuming clay jar holds salt. Next to it, a sprig of bay dries at the pace of good sense. Nothing here asks to be admired. Everything is ready to be of use. Fire is guided, not commanded. Kindling listens to the match. The match bows to the log. The log agrees to become a long, slow sentence. Hestia's hand is the habit of adding a small stick at the right time, not too early, not too late. Ash settles without sulking. Smoke reads the flue correctly and goes where it helps the roof remember its work. In this house, warmth is a tone, not a shout. People adjust to this tone in ways a visitor can measure. Voices lower because they prefer to be heard the first time. Chairs scrape less because feet know their distances. Spoons become quiet instruments. Their tapping says ready and thank you, and rarely hurry. Even quarrels pick smaller words and end at the rim of a bowl where appetite persuades everyone toward kindness. Hestia is not against excitement. She is for returns. Bread arrives, not as event but as answer. A loaf cracked open resigns a curve of steam that belongs equally to noses and memory. Oil says it's mild gold on a plate and does not object to the pinch of salt. Cheese remembers grass, and olives remember shade. A pot that simmered all day is rewarded by being emptied with respect. The table is not a stage. It is ground. The miracle remains that hunger ends in a room that knows how to hold it. In a corner, a child's small bed leans against a wall that keeps the heat's second language radiance. Hestia registers the child's turning over as the room might register wind, and the flame shortens a fraction to give the night the right size. A dog arranges itself into the shape that fits the hearth best. Circle, nose to tail, tail to nose. The house learns the dog's sleep and subtracts worries accordingly. When coals sell, they spell quiet in a script anyone can learn. Guests knock and are answered by welcome in 3 acts, a seat, a bowl, a sentence that requires no confession. Hestia teaches the host to offer, and the guest to accept without inventorying debts. On the shelf by the door stands a second, smaller lamp for latecomers who must leave early. It is the lamp of safe distance, a little circle that can be carried into cool air, returning its warm coin to the city's purse without asking to be repaid. Etiquette here is maintenance made lovely. Shoes go near, not on, the warm stone enough to dry, not enough to scorch. Wood is stacked with the grain outward, because beauty likes honesty. Embers are raked outward just before bed, then gathered inward again. A heart beat the hearth, and the hands share to beats that keep the same time. In the morning, the ash will bed the new fire as elder backs the young. Generations are simply layers of heat learning to be helpful. Hestia's symbols are ordinary instruments that behave, tongues that do not bite, poker that knows when to leave ash alone, broom that writes its circles with steady penmanship. She prefers aprons to armor and spoons to spears. If she carries a blessing, it fits in a jar. Green salt, a little oil. When she speaks, it sounds like instructions for a house finding its best posture. Move the stool a palm width. Turn the lamp a finger's breadth. Place water where someone will remember it at night. Wider than one room, her work becomes city. On a shared flame at the Prytanean, strangers discover they are not strange, only hungry in similar ways, only cold in similar ways. Disputes, warned, loosen a notch. Laws stop sounding like metal and start sounding like wood. Firm shaped living. Hestia teaches public buildings the trick she taught private ones. Put the fire where people can see each other. Make the doors open inward and outward with equal grace. Keep a ladle where anyone can reach it. There is ceremony, yes, but folded into use. A bride takes a coal wrapped in wool and lights a new house. The flame is not imported glory, only continuity. A traveler who must leave at dawn pockets warmth from the last stick and whispers thanks to the mantle as if it were a person. Children are told to respect the fire not because it is holy, but because it is how supper happens and how winter is less unkind. Which is holiness enough? Some nights Hestia allows a story, but never one that exhausts the years. The tale will be sized to a mug of something warm. It will stop exactly where yawn becomes permission to sleep. The fire, hearing the cadence, shortens again, and the room, having been a guest to its own occupants all evening, escorts them to bed. Doors are barred with a snug, quiet click that the heart recognizes as the correct music of safety. There are griefs that visit every house. Hestia does not keep them out. She keeps them company. A chair left empty is still drawn up to the fire. The room holds its place until laughter can sit there again without guilt. In illness, flame moves from hearth to lamp to candle and back, escorting breath through narrow hours. In birth, heat is divided carefully between mother and kettle and the midwife's hands, none neglected, none jealously hoarded. The goddess's miracle is allocating warmth without waste. If the hearth dies in the night, no drama. Ash keeps a coal for the honest hand. 2 sticks, crossed. Breath, gentle. Spark, persuaded. The room accepts the returned heart without commentary, and the day proceeds. Hestia does not reward brilliance. She rewards reliability. She is the patron of lanterns that are trimmed on time and of lists that include water the plant, stir the stew, listen while washing the cups. She likes clocks only when they agree to be servants. To carry her with you, you need no shrine. A thermos becomes a portable hearth if passed to a friend. A text that says home safe is a coal shared across town. A key left under a mat for someone who needs to sleep without questions is flame's most intelligent sibling. You make a hearth with your posture, shoulders down, chin easy, eyes willing to hold another's gaze without searching it for errands. Rooms notice. Rooms respond. When you prepare for sleep, behave as fire behaves when it knows morning is certain. Bank thoughts lightly. Rake worries outward so they cool. Draw inward the ember of something kind. Today's loaf, a clean sheet, a made bed, an answered letter. Put a small glass of water within reach. Decide now the words you will say if you wake. Enough later, thank you. These are Hestia's words. They bring the heart to banked red, which is the color of rest that lasts. Dream will likely give you a kitchen, not the cluttered one from a hurried week, but the archetype. Clear table, warm center. Window with a square of night and one friendly star. Kettle beginning just now to murmur. Someone moves gently in that room, you or someone you love or someone you will love later without knowing it yet, and their hands do the practical magic Hestia taught. Lift, pour, cover, carry, share. You wake already warm. Morning in a Hestia house is not rousing. It is reassembly. Flame wakes to the elbow's touch. Kettle climbs its quiet heel to boiling. Bread takes heat with pleasure. Socks posted overnight near the chair are now dry. The door opens to a light that is allowed rather than demanded. You leave the room in good order because you like returning to good order. The fire does not sulk at being left. It expects your step and keeps a small promise for later. Outside, the world is busier, but you carry the hearth's weather under your coat, a small, portable climate of orange patience. You will place it in rooms that have forgotten they can be kind, and watch them remember. If someone snaps, you will hand them a cup. If someone is cold behind the eyes, you will find a chair for their back. If a meeting is failing, you will nudge the table closer to a circle and notice how the tone drops to human. At day's end, the house will see you from the lane and reduce the distance by smelling faintly of soup. Hestia will have kept faith with the plank, the pot, the jar, the cup, the match, the ash, the ember. You will keep faith by crossing the threshold, which is the only sacrament she ever asked for. Step in, take warmth, become warmth, pass it along. Vineyards learn evening as if it were a skill. Leaves turn their paler sides and make a soft river of green under the last light. Grapes keep coolness inside skins that have practiced modesty all day. A path down the rose feels the feet it was made for, and hurried, even, particular. Somewhere between the field and the town, a trellis stretches a veil of shade over a low table. This is the hour when celebration remembers it can whisper. Dionysus is present without parade. No thunder of drums, no antlers of noise, only a staff that could as easily be a walking stick, ivy, that decided to be kind, a wreath that weighs less than it looks. The god's smile is the temperature of ripeness, not fever. He moves the way a good host moves, noticing whose cup is low, setting a stool where a back will be grateful, adjusting the lamp so moths can be included without burning. Harvest has already taught the day to be precise. Hands lifted, hands passed, hands set down, grape to basket, basket to press. Bare feet in the treading floor keep a rhythm that has outlived metronomes. Step, hold, turn, rest. The press itself is a quiet machine beam screw timber singing in low syllables as juice remembers it was once water and sun and now is something new. In clay jars nearby, the first must begins its sleep that is also a work. It will wake later as wine that knows how to be company rather than command. The feast that follows is built from ordinary excellences. Bread that learned a good crust, olives that kept the afternoon inside them, cheese that remembers hills without boasting, figs open like gentle arguments that end correctly. Bowls pass the way stories pass when no one is trying to be the center of them. Water declines to be forgotten. Pitchers breathe on the table. Cups mind their weights. Wine appears as one guest among many, willing to listen, willing to soften edges without erasing them. Satyrs in this telling have learned the ethics of porches. Their hooves are quiet on wood. Their laughter I've sized to the room. One sets a child's spinning top moving with a flick that means play, not show. Another tunes a pipe and chooses scales that please dogs and not just people. Monads are present as keepers of the cool breeze and the right dance step when the lamp needs straightening. Frenzy has the night off. Measure wears the wreath and finds it fits. Dionysus favors a cup and an ear. He pours a little, listens more. Someone tells the kind of story that fixes a hinge in the heart. How a quarrel ended because a fig tree dropped 3 leaves precisely onto the stoop. How a letter arrived on the day a door was painted, and the paint stayed unmarked because the bearer had patience. The god nods in the way vines nod when wind is correct. Everywhere at once, yes, without applause. Music is a low river. A lyre keeps a clean path. A flute writes the sky with a line you can follow without losing your place. An old song comes with its old balance, verses that distinguish sorrow from drama. Choruses that teach breath to carry both. Feet remember patterns chairs never forgot. Sway, step, turn, and where you can sit again. Even the lamp flame participates, lifting when a voice lifts, settling when silence is wiser. Wine's gifts remain domestic. It loosens the hand that was clutching the wrong tool. It unknots a sentence so apology can find the door. It polishes the mirror just enough that a person can approve their own face without confusion. Overindulgence knocks, hears the party's tone, and moves on to houses that like noise. Here the measure is a cup that keeps seeing the jug and a jug that keeps seeing the well dot to the side. Near a wall where grape leaves draw shadows like lace to people practiced that useful craft. Reconciliation. Their voices are soft. Their hands open on the table, palm to wood. The god stands far enough away to give them privacy, and close enough to be an excuse to pause if either needs to breathe. When they do breathe, the air comes back kinder than it left. Bread becomes a sacrament of ordinary peace, broken neat, shared warm, no one counting. A dog circles twice and sleeps. A moth thinks the lamp is a moon and is gently persuaded that it is also a lamp. Somewhere behind the trellis, the press sighs once more and becomes quiet. Stars rehearse their small positions. A breeze learns the names of everyone present and forgets none. The night studies how to hold a gathering without dropping any of its smaller duties, to cool, to fragrance, to keep insects agreeable, to make doors feel safe in their frames. There is a part of the feast that belongs to remembering the dead, and even this arrives in the key of ease. A cup is poured to the earth. A few names are spoken clear, not loud, and silence sits with them respectfully, and then lets them rest. The god approves. The vine has always known how to bind this world to its neighbors without hurting either. Grief is given a chair. It does not sit alone. At the proper moment, someone tells a small, perfect joke the absent would have liked, and the table nods as night tilts toward its rightful rest. Tables are cleared with the choreography of people who have done this together before. Plates stack, crumbs sketch a map of the evening and then are carried to the hens, who will thank the house in their way tomorrow. Lamps lower to the tone the room will keep in sleep. Children, who drifted to cushions earlier with orange slices in their hands are moved gently to beds that have been warmed by the breath of stories. The air forgets nothing and forgives everything. Dionysus lingers. He ties one vine back where it slipped its twine. He nudges a cup under a roof edge where dew will wash it sweet for morning. He lays his staff where a walker will find it useful and call it a stick, not a relic. Before he goes, he checks the jars and the door and the starlight and the dog. He leaves the night in a better posture than he found it, which is the mark of a good guest and a good God. The lesson he leaves is small enough to carry. Joy is a muscle that strengthens with gentle use. Appetite is best when it remembers to feed others. Sleep comes sooner to rooms that chose laughter the size of their walls. If you keep wine in the house, keep also water. If you keep stories, keep pauses. If you keep music, keep a chair for silence. Measure makes more of everything. When you lie down, you will hear the vineyard continuing its day slowly, leaves turning more silver, far presses ticking once, a moth finding the window. Breath takes the measure of the feast, and adopts it. Inhale for bread, exhale for wine, a pause for olive and cheese, then the long quiet course of sleep. If you dream, let it be of a trellis at night, and a table gentle with cups. Let the God pass by as a breeze that knows your name and needs no answer. In the morning, the table will remember how it shone. The press will be still as a closed book. The jars will keep their patient work behind cool clay. You will pour water first, then coffee or tea or nothing at all, and you will recognize that celebration finished correctly is a form of rest. The day will feel mended. Vines will begin their small, green mathematics again, threading light into sweetness at a pace no clock can command. The workshop wakes before the city, the way a kettle thinks before it boils. On the island slope, the door stands half open to the sea's early blue. Air moves through with the cool politeness of a guest who knows not to disturb tools at rest. Within, iron keeps yesterday's shape until hands ask otherwise. Tongues nap in pairs. Hammers lean with their heads together like old friends who told the same good story twice and didn't mind. Hephaestus is here without spectacle. Limp light on the floor shows where his step prefers. The hearth is banked a red hush rather than a roar because heat, like strength, is best when measurable. He sets a palm above the coals and reads their sentence. Ready. A bellows breath follows, not dramatic, only long enough to turn ember into small sun. On the anvil a length of iron waits, dark and patient, the exact size of the job. This is not a forge of ore tonight. It is a place where household and harbor learn their instruments, a hinge that will stop a door from clearing its throat, a chisel that will ask wood its grain instead of telling it, a nail that understands holding is not the same as biting, a lamp ring that will keep glass honest when weather argues. Hephaestus chooses a hammer by weight and purpose. The handle fits his palm not because the handle is perfect, but because the hand has taught it how to be. He arrives through a sequence of courtesies, coal to blow, iron to cherry, hammer to rhythm. The first blows are not strikes but introductions. The metal says what it is capable of. The man listens. Sparks small stars with short errands write their quiet punctuation against the dark. A bar becomes a curve by degrees. Edges learn to end with kindness rather than with pride. Quench waits nearby in a trough that smells of pine and salt. Steam is promised, not yet invited. Between heats, time dilates into useful smallness. The smith dresses the face of the hammer with a stone. The anvil's horn receives a touch of oil where it sang too brightly last night. The tongs are checked for bite and eased with a wedge of leather. A swallow skins the doorway and counts the strokes without judging. Outside, a boat tests its rope against a cleat and approves the fit. The world keeps tempo. Visitors arrive as errands, not as audience. A woman brings a broken kettle handle wrapped in a scrap of cloth. She sets it down the way a person sets down a question. The god warms the old rivet until it remembers its manners, then peens it back to a head that will hold and look decent while doing so. He adds a washer for the years the kettle still owes the house. Payment is bread still warm. He accepts a heel and nods toward the water jar. Work and thanks are traded in compatible weights. A boy comes with a fishing knife that has lost its truth. The blade, once keen, now argues with rope. Hephaestus shows him the stone and the angle. Slow circles, then strokes. Listen for the whisper, not the hiss. The boy learns the difference between cutting and hurting, between sharpened and thin. He leaves with a tool that will not fail him on a wet morning and with a practice for keeping it that way. The forge has always taught repair as a form of mercy. On the bench by the window a more delicate iron glows, a small bronze latch that will someday close over a book of paper. The hinge is made not to conquer but to remember, open and close, at the gentle cadence of reading. The pin is fitted, withdrawn, fitted again. A drop of oil travels its line like a blessing and stays invisible afterward, as blessings often should. When tested, the latch shuts with a silence that still manages to be heard. Elsewhere, a chain for a harbor lamp gathers link to link a measured infinity. Each oval is an argument between strength and grace resolved to everyone's satisfaction. Hephaestus tests one link in a vise that has never lied. It holds the weight of a stone plus a little more. Good. In winter this chain will lift a lantern high enough that sailors can read it next to rain. In summer, it will keep moths content with what is bright and safe, not with what burns. Heat, if left to itself, would be a tyrant. The god refuses it that role. He banks coals, he times blows, he rests metal in air as deliberately as he rests it in water. When quenching comes, it is a conversation, not a punishment. The red goes to black under a traveling cloud. Steam rises and leaves. Hardness arrives without brittleness because someone remembered to be gentle. The trough sighs once and forgets the excitement like a good friend who doesn't repeat confidences. In a pause between tasks, Hephaestus walks to the door and sets the tools so they can watch the sea. He does this for them as much as for himself. Wind strings the rigging of the boats below. The bay's surface solves an equation of light and shade that would be proud if it knew itself. From farther down the lane, laughter in the key of bread reaches the forge. A cart's wooden argument with cobble resolves satisfactorily. The god nods to all of it and returns to the anvil with a better rhythm. Stories come here and forget to be large. The net that once caught a god will catch olives now, lifted from brine with clever respect. The trap that once grabbed a liar's ankle will be an honest boar spring that eases slamming in a house where children sleep. The finest girdle ever made is tonight a good belt for a man who has lost weight from working well and needs something he can trust. Glory, rerouted into utility, shines differently and longer. Aphrodite visits as a breeze rather than a drama. She lays a hand on the door frame where the wood has learned smoothness by being touched often. Her eyes approve a hinge that declines to squeak. She picks up a small copper mirror no bigger than her palm. It keeps a face as it is no brighter, no worse. On the bench she leaves a sprig of myrtle and a smile that outlasts perfume. The god pretends not to notice the first. The second he notices without looking up. Toward late afternoon a neighbor brings a lyre with a fret worn hollow by good songs. Hephaestus inlays a sliver of bone into the groove. String will travel sweeter there. He loosens a peg and gives it an extra quarter-turn of truth. When strummed, the instrument thanks the room with a voice that fits in a chest without crowding it. Music will travel again, this time not to startle but to stitch edges of evening together. Hem, not headline. As dusk approaches, work moves from hot to warm to done. Finished pieces cool on wood, not on stone. No need to startle them after they have behaved. The last heat is spent on a small project the god keeps for himself, a hook for a lamp over a bench where night reading occurs. Its curve is generous, but not wasteful. Its end is a scroll that will never snag a sleeve. He hangs it without ceremony and adjusts the lamp so its circle of light will not bully anyone's eyes. Tools do not go to sleep thrown in a heap. They are laid in their places, edges away from edges, jaws not clenched. The bellows breathes once more to clear its lungs. Ashes pulled level over coals that will be asked to remember the world in the morning. The floor is swept with the sort of care that does not brag. The broom writes a good paragraph in dust and deletes it, sentence by sentence. The forge arranges itself for rest the way a body arranges blankets, modestly, with foresight. On his way out, Hephaestus puts a hand on the anvil. It is warm, satisfied. The anvil says what anvils always say at this hour: tomorrow. He steps into the lane. The sea has tightened its belt for evening and looks serious without being severe. From the harbor, a lamp lifts on the new chain. It holds, and the light spreads its kind authority across water that has known many orders and prefers this one. What the forge teaches stays small enough to fit in a pocket. Make things that reduce friction. Let heat be measured. Sharpen for usefulness, not pride. Repair first, replace later. Test until silence agrees. Put tools away so morning will find you more ready than you remember being. If fire is needed, bank it. If anger is needed, make it as purposeful as a flame that boils water and then rests. Sleep will arrive tonight with the texture of oiled wood and the scent of clean iron. Dreams will file edges to round where the mind might snag. Hinges will learn to swing in the hall where an apology lives. You may find yourself in a room with a low, red heart and tools laid out like patient senses. Hephaestus will not speak. He will set a hand on your shoulder until you lower it, then hand you a small hammer that fits perfectly. You will tap something stubborn back into alignment and feel the day settle. In the morning, if you must lift a problem too heavy for one person, you will remember the gods' practice, levers, friends, and a plan that keeps backs honest. If a thought burns too hot, you will spread it thinner with work and air. If a room squeaks at you, you will find its hinge and persuade it. And if someone brings you the day wrapped in cloth asking quietly for help, you will know how to set it on the bench, warm it, and return it whole. Dawn spreads a thin ribbon of pearl along the water, and the shore answers with small, regular breaths. Waves arrive the way considered guests arrive on time, carrying gifts that are easy to accept, coolness for feet, salt for thought, a sound that shows how endings become beginnings without drama. Sand keeps last night's secrets carefully ironed. Shows life face up like polite letters waiting to be read. If this is Aphrodite's hour, it is not a parade. It is a practice. The shrine is little for pale columns, a lintel that remembers swallows, a shallow bowl set where the first sunlight will gather. No incense fusses. Sea air is perfume enough, clean mineral, edged with thyme from the bluff. A wicker basket holds small offerings that do not ask the world to notice them. A fig split neatly in two, a dove's feather found without chasing, a ribbon that once learned the shape of hair. On the low step, a copper mirror rests face down. It will reflect only when asked. Beauty in this place is maintenance before it is miracle. A comb beside the bowl smiles in teeth that learn to be gentle. Oil in a small clay flask keeps the color of honey and the temperament of water, given instructions to be kind. A woman rinses a piece of linen and wrings it with forgiveness for what it carried yesterday. A boy untangles his fishing line the way a decent heart untangles a rumor patiently, without letting the knot feel ashamed of being a knot. Foam comes and goes with a lesson it never grows tired of teaching. Appear, brighten, vanish, repeat, leaving the world cleaner for your visit. Aphrodite's first footsteps are waves, and her first words are the hush of their long schooling. When she stands, it is with the modesty of someone who knows the difference between adornment and care. A strand of seagrass has learned to be a ribbon. She ties her hair without asking when to consent. Wind consents anyway. Temples elsewhere tell stories of birth from foam and letters a child might find too tall. Here the story lowers its voice. A shell large enough for two hands to share fills and empties. A veil forgets whether it is water or cloth, and rests on a shoulder without deciding. Doves keep their privacy in the cliff shade and speak only in the small wing noises that make dogs raise their heads and then think better of it. The goddess does not ask the day to watch her. She asks the day to match her pace. Couples come as they are. No vase today, only repairs. Two voices try again at the edge of a pool the sea left behind. You can hear the senses lose their sharp corners as the tide erases their edges for practice. He says, I should have knocked, and means a door and also a heart. She says, it is open now and means a door and also a heart. Aphrodite is near enough to be an excuse for either to look away while tears find their correct level. Salt is honest. The pool holds what is offered and makes no comment on the rock shelf. A fisherman turns a net until the sun finds a rip. His needle is no taller than his thumb and twice as certain. He repairs because the sea is generous and should not be met with laziness. He repairs because fish deserve an exit as well as an entrance. He repairs because a net, like a marriage, is mostly holes held together by string, and the holding is the art. When he finishes, he rinses the net and lays it out like a page that has been corrected and now reads more kindly. Children who have already forgiven everything the sea has ever done build roads for water with their heels and call them rivers. They ferry shells from one country of sand to another and believe they are traders. A little girl offers the goddess a stone with a line of quartz across it like a horizon. Aphrodite notes the gift the way the sea notes a drop of rain. Grateful beyond accounting, the girl laughs because a wave confesses to tickling her ankle. And this is, in some cosmologies, the whole point of mornings. A comb is lifted and becomes liturgy. The hair remembers rivers. The comb remembers trees. Oil remembers olives. The hand remembers a kindness received and repeats it. A copper mirror is turned glossy side up, but only long enough to check that a face belongs to itself. No one argues with features. They arrange them under light that forgives. Duty here is not approval. It is congruence. The inside and the outside arriving at the same table and finding there is bread. Aphrodite's counsel is quiet and practical. Wash the cup before filling it. Share the first slice. Keep 2 towels. Speak praise as if it had weight you mean to lift for someone else. Love, in her register, is a verb that means to maintain with tenderness. A shore cannot exist without the discipline of tides. A heart cannot last without the discipline of gentle attention. The goddess is patron of tidy rooms as much as of songs she knows both keep people out of harm's way. By mid-morning the color has shifted from pearl to linen. Small boats practice shyness at the moorings. They touch and release, each one learning consent without speeches. 2 friends sit knee to knee and pick grains of sand from each other's palms, less as grooming than as an excuse to stay exactly this close. A widow sets down a cup with 2 olives and stares at the triangle where sea meets sky meets memory. Aphrodite stands behind her long enough to be felt and then goes company that does not require conversation. If jealousy visits, it is turned away by chores. The jealous hand is given a brush for shells. Here polish. See how their work was as much time as temperature. See what patience can do to roughness. Learn. Envy is sent into the water to count the ways light arrives at the same place and chooses different angles each time. Pride is asked to carry 2 pitchers uphill and comes back willing to apologize. The goddess is not against feeling. She is against feelings that do not help. Lunch is bread and brine and something green that tastes like a field walking near the sea. Purslane or fennel perhaps. Cut young. The knife is sharp enough to avoid cruelty. Wine, if any, is 1 cup and has already learned water's language. A fig is closed carefully after a taste because it is better to save sweetness than to own it. The shrine's bowl receives a drop of oil, a pinch of salt, and 1 flat stone placed on another, a portable promise to keep things level. Stories here wear linen. The loud version of Paris, and Helen removes its sandals and sits on the breakwater to consider whether beauty and possession ever belonged in the same sentence. It discovers they did not. It leaves better shod. The myth of Pygmalion is shown a broom and learns that love is most itself when it can sweep a doorstep without being noticed. The fair as a genre is asked to spend an afternoon teaching children to float. It returns less interested in being a headline. By afternoon the tide has learned most of the day's names and calls them back in a low voice. Pebble, or heel, ribbon, comb. Phone keeps the punctuation. People nap in the correct shade. Towels become flags of nations dedicated to rest. Someone washes a cut with salt water and does not flinch. This is how healing sometimes enters the house, stinging, brief, purposeful. Aphrodite approves all medicines that leave the patient more themselves. If the goddess keeps a ledger, it is for moments of kindness that never ask to be remembered. A stranger retrieves a hat and does not make a companion of the act. A couple laughs at the same small mismatch and forgive both mischief and error without naming either. A mother learns which words keep a child by the shallows and which words send a child too far into bravado. She chooses the first kind and is rewarded by peace disguised as an ordinary afternoon. Toward evening, the shore folds its brightness and puts it away for tomorrow. The shrine bowl returns to plain water. The copper mirrors turn face down again, because night does not need help being deep. The comb dries. The ribbon finds a pocket. The oil hides its shine under clay. Aphrodite ties one knot in the air so small only a fine heart could feel it, and the breeze answers with a lessening no one else would notice. Someone's quarrel, postponed all day by intelligent grace, dissolves before it starts. If she leaves a sign, it is not a shell too perfect to be true, but a shell with a tiny crack that admits the day's truth. Loveliness that endures comes from being used kindly. She walks the waterline, and her footprints are filled instantly. A gull steps into one and looks somehow improved by the choice. She is gone by the time the first lance in the village learn their circles. The shore keeps the lesson without needing to say where it came from. When sleep is ready, it borrows the sea's curriculum. Breath arrives, brightens, fades, returns phone's catechism. A thought about yourself rises and is allowed to dissolve without verdict. A memory of someone else arrives and is combed carefully until it lies smooth. The bed is a beach with the tide set perfectly. Pillows are dunes. Sheets are the veil between waking and dream, light enough to lift with a sigh. If you dream of a mirror, let it be copper and turned down. Let the room reflect you instead, the kind order you made, the care you took, the small beauty that came of it. Morning will find the comb where you left it, and the ribbon where you knew you would. The bowl will accept water again, and remember not to spill it. In the glass your face will look like a person who belongs to the shore and to the city in equal measure. You will tie your hair or your doubts or your errands with the same knot Aphrodite tied in the air, and the day obliged and grateful will hold. Afternoon trims the day into agreeable rectangles. Courtyards darken at the edges. Fig leaves count their own shadows. A cistern returns sky to anyone who bends. In a precinct of laurel and pale stone, Hera keeps rooms where promises learn their best posture. No trumpets. A broom writes its calm circles. A dove edits the lintel with its small, approving feet. The goddess is not thunder here. She is alignment, door to threshold, hand to hand, word to deed. The court is simple. A colonnade that knows how to hold shade. A bench that favors listening over display. A low table where 2 cups can be set down without clink. Laurel stands like a choir that chose the key beforehand. At the back, the doorway opens onto a smaller, more private room. Cool floor, clean lamp, a bowl with a rim thick enough to endure decades of washing and still be itself. On the wall, not a proclamation, only a length of plain cloth hung straight, its warp and weft agreeing in a language older than quarrel. Here receives work, not cases. A couple arrives with a basket, receipts of days counted, eggs, a mended strap, a rent wall patched, a child's litter with figs in the corners. They do not plead, they place. The goddess weighs these with an instrument the world often misplaces, proportion. She adds a laurel leaf to the basket and the smell adjusts the air toward olive and rain. Vows, the court reminds gently, are not cliffs. They are roads. Roads want maintenance more than speeches. There is ceremony, but it is mostly etiquette elevated into care. Hands are rinsed, not to erase, but to prepare for the next touch. A wreath is measured against brows, not as prize, but as cooling shade for the work of keeping. Knots are tied at the waist and wrist loose enough to breathe, firm enough to remember. Bread is broken into quarters. Yours, mine, ours, guests. Salt, a pinch for truth. Water, a sip for patience. No one leaves hungry. Hunger has ruined more treaties than tempests ever did. If hero wears a crown in this room, it is laurel thinned by discretion. She moves through the precinct, altering little. A stool drawn nearer. A cup rotated so a chip faces the drinker who won't mind it. A window unlatched to let a bard's distant practice pass like a thread through cloth. Her glance favors hinges. They are the parts of houses that turn and are ignored. She oils a hinge with a fingertip. A door ceases to translate strain into sound. A marriage is spared 10 small irritations a day. Witnesses here are useful rather than grand. A grandmother remembers which console kept a field from panicking in a dry week. She repeats it like a good recipe. A child proves that yesterday's resentment has already failed by falling asleep on the lap of the person it had briefly targeted. A neighbor brings a bolt of plain linen as gift, sheets, towels, bandages, the general ledger of tenderness. Here it tallies none of this. She lets the room learn its arithmetic. Arguments are not forbidden. They are paced. Each speaker holds a smooth stone while talking and pauses it when done. The stone cools hot hands and keeps turns honest. Voices that threaten to rise encounter the ceiling's deliberate height. They decrescendo at the correct moment, when someone reaches for an old injury. Here points to Brune, to Laurel, to bread, 3 nouns that do not accept adverbs of blame. The tongue, left without easy fuel, chooses smaller, truer words. In the side room a loom rests with heddles raised to fingerlids. A pause that looks like an invitation. Threads wait where they were left. No knot drawn tight enough to regret. A woman shows a man what warp means promise under tension and what weft means daily passage across. He counts aloud under, over, as if pledging the simple faith of repetition. Their hands touch at the sewage, that clean edge where a fabric decides to be whole. The cloth says yes in the only tone it knows. Even elsewhere, a chest opens. Inside, the dowry is kept without pageantry, a small lamp that will outlive 2 arguments, and 1 winter, a knife that will slice vegetables thinner than complaint, a shawl woven with a patience that prefers warmth to display. These are Hera's luxuries. Gold can be stolen or flaunted into trouble. Utility hides in plain sight and makes a household rich the correct way, by removing frictions a day would otherwise bruise itself on. Vows are spoken with the vocabulary of tools and weather. I will carry water with you. I will close shutters with you when wind decides to practice. I will count olives into jars, and I will count to 10. I will let you be quiet when your quiet has work to do. Ring, Laura will do. Kiss, bread first. Then mouths remember themselves and the kiss lasts because it was not asked to prove anything. Here minds not only spouses but the agreements that keep a tongue shaped like courtesy. She blesses contracts that regulate noise, light, borrowing, and return. She prefers a loan ledger to a lawsuit. A neighborhood that shares ladders rarely needs to be summoned before gods. At her altar, a potter and a baker agree on fair prices with the help of a scale that has forgotten how to cheat. Too much, a boy blurts when the weight leaves. The men laugh and adjust. The boy is right. The goddess is pleased to have apprentices. In one corner, a cradle rocks with nobody's foot on it. The breeze took that duty. Hera leaves a fig leaf on the cradle's rail, as if to grant the baby the oldest passport humans have known, welcome. Next to it, a bed is made in a way that makes invitations to sleep stronger than invitations to worry. The blanket's fold is a lesson in restraint, enough to cover, not enough to bind. Pillows keep quiet opinions. A chair by the bed holds clothes that will be reached in the night without fumbling. Foresight is a form of love. Sometimes betrayal enters, full of its own injury. The court does not shout it down. It sizes it. What happened? When? Who was hungry? Who slept too little? Who forgot to ask? Who forgot to answer? Harris questions do not seek spectacle. They seek leverage, the place where a small adjustment makes a large improvement. Rest is prescribed before justice, food before verdict, apology before plan. Often, after sleep and soup, justice has less to do because the world is already back in shape. When crowns do appear wreaths upon heads, they are temporary and soft. A couple who has kept a promise through a hard year wears laurel around the evening's conversation, not to be seen, but to cool brows. Children hang flowers from the door handle. The door behaves exactly as it did yesterday, and that is the point. Harris Festival is not a day of exemption. It is a rehearsal of how ordinary can be excellent when kept. Sun tips toward its lowest shelf. The court writes its last pages in a light that makes stone look edible, honeyed, safe. People gather their baskets, now heavier by one laurel leaf and lighter by 6 irritations traded away. A woman ties her hair with a ribbon that used to be an argument and is now a tool. It holds better than anger ever did. A man walks slower because walking faster never got him what he thought he wanted. They both laugh once, the laugh of proportion rediscovered. Torchlight learns the precinct's geometry: square, circle, door, path. A priestess pins a scrap of linen with a small bronze pin. Today's measure taken, tomorrow's promised. A dog, who has slept through justice and mercy with equal trust, stretches and escorts the last guest to the lane. Hera stands in the doorway for an extra beat, not to watch, but to make sure a hinge she oiled in the morning keeps the night from squeaking. What you carry from her court weighs less than a loaf and feeds longer. Put moral where tempers rise. Oil the hinge before the fight. Make 2 cups of tea when only one mouth has asked. Save 1 chair for the person who does not know they need to sit. Promise like a loom weaves under over, repeat edges neat. Pattern visible enough for children to learn by looking. Keep a stone for holding while you speak. Pass it when you finish. Listen while it warms in someone else's hand. When sleep comes, it will arrange your house in the mind as Hera would. Fire banked, door set, water placed, cloth straight, baskets counted, vows folded like linens that will be used again tomorrow. Dreams will not stage weddings. They will stage breakfasts that happen for years without remark. If a coral tries to enter, a laurel leaf will be offered. It will smell like rain and olive and cooling bread. The coral will sit down and eat that in the morning. The same door will open on the same street, and it will feel like success rather than boredom. The chair will still be where backs can trust it. The broom will still know the floor. The bed will be remade without complaint. Harris Court will not remember your name because it doesn't need to. It will remember your work. And that is how vows endure, not by clinging, but by fitting again and again and again. Arcadia receives the afternoon as a gift it already knows how to unwrap. Hills fold into one another with the patient geometry she'd prefer. Oaks hold shade steady. Plane trees lay a green ceiling over a stream that says water's simple alphabet. Over, between, around, through. Bills speak from distant ribs and return without hurry. Somewhere dog commits to napping in the posture of trust. This is Pan's country goat path like good senses, thigh at ankle height. A wind that hums the correct key before anyone plays. There is a hush here at noon, but not the kind that frightens. It is the hush of everything doing its chosen work. Sap slipping, bees counting, a spring finishing a thought it began last winter. Shepherds regulate the slope with their walking, up for a glance, down for a check, across for a kindness. The flock edits the meadow in commas of white and brown. A kid that wandered finally remembers its mother's signature and returns, bleating an apology that nobody writes down because nobody needs to. Pan is present in the way a landscape decides to agree with itself. His staff leans against bark. His shadow crosses a terrace and makes lizards reconsider their appointments. His laugh, if it's that, becomes a small, right breeze when two tired animals find the same shade without dispute. He is not the shouter in this telling. He's the caretaker of nap, of pace, of music sighs to hills. Reeds along the stream are not decoration. They are instruments waiting for consent. Pan cuts only where flow says yes, and only enough to teach. Each stem is measured by breath, cubit of chest, palm of hand, finger of lip. He thinks of syrinx not as a chase, but as a lesson in distance kept. The pipe remembers, lengths in a line, each with its tiny corridor for air, each tuned to a tone that can travel without raising dust. Many mouths have called these pipes by his name. He plays them softly enough that even shyness listens. The tune he keeps is not brilliant. It is friendly. It has room for bells and wings, and the awkward comedy of hooves on stones. A boy learning guard steps falls into measure and stands a bit taller. Even courage, it turns out, enjoys accompaniment. A girl in sandals ties her laces tighter on the offbeat and grins because some rhythms bless ordinary knots. The dog blinks and shifts to keep the drone in its pillow. The flock takes 2 steps and decides to keep 3 beats of stillness. Even eating can be musical when grass is generous. Lunch is Arcadian arithmetic. Bread plus cheese plus olives equals a day that will finish kindly. A sprig of wild oregano is added to oil in a cap sent for appetite, medicine for after. A fly that thought itself urgent is persuaded to study somewhere else. The stream receives crusts politely. Pan drinks, wipes his mouth on the back of his hand in the style of unbothered gods, and sets the cup where the next thirst will find it. Hospitality here is never announced. It is staged in small instruments shade, cup, bench. Time. Stories wander by with their sandals off. Syrinx, in this quieter version, chooses to remain a reed and to sing at her own speed. Pan takes the hint and makes the instrument that honors refusal by turning it into music. Distance becomes duets, pursuit becomes practice. Echo lives deeper in the glen than rumor says, repeating only what deserves repeating. Short calls here, and home and hey, lamb sent back slightly softer so none of them feel like orders. Panic, in its ancient meaning, dissolves into its softer kin. Panlaw, the noon trance that persuades even ambition to lie down for 10 sensible minutes. Work resumes in agreeable units. A wall gets another lift of stones to hands, and a knee's help. The gap between fig trees is strung with twine and decides to be a gate. A path learns a switchback instead of a scold. Pan's hand is in the engineering of rest. That bench is just high enough. That water trough stands on a flat. That style allows an old knee to act young for 1 step per day. He blesses the valley with calibrations rather than miracles. When the flock must cross a stream, the tune changes a shade. 2 notes hold like arms outstretched. A single bright chirp lands like a stepping stone where doubt had planned to be. Hooves consider, then commit. The smallest kid slips once, and does not drown in embarrassment. Pan is good at drying pride as well as fleece. On the far bank, shakes are counted by someone who enjoys arithmetic. The bell's reply says, present, present, present. A herdsman carves a new mouth on his pipe with a knife. The forge in town talk to cut kindly. Shavings curl like promise. He tests a note and frowns not at error but at possibility. Pan listens with the ear of a neighbor who respects both silence and attempts. The god sometimes brings the second voice under melody, not harmony that calls attention to itself, but the faint road under the cart, the reason the journey feels correct. Toward mid-afternoon the heat chooses where to be ambitious. The hills choose where to ignore it. A shimmering rides the lower air. Goats, being philosophers, practice stillness until shimmer commits elsewhere. The dog, a realist, moves its nap from sun to shade at the exact speed of thought becoming action. Pan, who's watched enough summers to be merciful, pours water where ants have decided on a bridge and watches the correction improve their traffic. Management, he could call it. Mercy works fine. Visitors from town sometimes arrive overdressed and underbreathed. Arcadia forgives them by teaching quickly. A hat is lowered half a finger. A collar is undone. A sentence is shortened so the mouth can enjoy water. Pan lends them a tune and a stick and a slope with a bench, and the town falls out of them just enough that they can be visited by the landscape instead of trying to improve it. If one insists on poetry, the god steers the verse toward names of grasses. It always helps. The afternoon nap that shepherds perfected is a civic invention. 10 minutes, no performing. A hat over the face. A pipe laid across the chest so the wind can play while the lungs rehearse. Dreams here are brief and practical, a gate that latches, a jar that doesn't spill, a lamb who was lost and is suddenly, sensibly found. Pan keeps watch exactly far enough away to be felt as shade and not as interference. When everyone wakes, the day is easier. Someone finds a used burr stuck here and frees it with the courtesy owed to any citizen of Wool. Someone else checks the sky and reads tomorrow off the edge of a cloud. Bring the second cloak. Start early. Bread not too much salt. A boy, proud of a straight wall, is given a crooked stone and learns where it fits without being scolded by geometry. The god barefoot now because formality has run its course crosses the stream without ripples that matter. Evening is the hour Pan prefers for teaching feet. The tune recruits heels and hips. A ring forms without announcement. The dance pattern is agricultural plant tend to harvest. Share expressed as step, sway, turn, clap. No one is excellent, and therefore everyone is excellent. Hilarity remains in its pen. Joy wanders freely. When the circle breaks, it does so because someone produced bread, not because someone stole attention. The dog barks once as punctuation, then returns to shepherding the boundary between porch and field. There is a moment every dusk when the hill line takes a breath. Pan is that breath, the last warm push across grass, the earliest cool poured down gullies in a leak that will be a river by midnight. He checks the flock with a glance that understands inventory as affection. He pockets a reed stub for later tinkering, pats the trunk of a plane tree that kept 100 naps honest, and ties a small knot in a vine so tomorrow's shade will fall exactly where the bench enjoys being useful. What he leaves behind is not an order but a habit. Measure your day in useful rests. Tune your work to the slope. Trim tools, not people. Keep a cup where a stranger might find it. Let music walk beside you instead of ahead. If fear visits, give it a task proportionate to its size. Watch that path, count those bells, mind this ember. The valley runs on such assignments. So does the mind. When you lie down later, your breath will imitate the instrument that learned you. Inhale along one reed, exhale along the next. A tiny pause where a finger lifted. Your ribs become a hillside. Your heart becomes a dog that settles with the precise circles and sleeps. If a worry arrives with hooves, it will also arrive with ears. A tune will catch those ears and escort the worry to the fence where it belongs. Dreams, if they play, will be of stone stairs that fit feet, of streams that cross beneath you, of a shepherd's call that knows your name and needs nothing but your presence to answer. Morning will find the reeds unbroken, the staff where it leaned, the path pleased with remember itself. Pan will already have walked the ridge, wrung one cloud into 2 coins of shade, and set the day's key in a comfortable register. The flock will rise into commas again. The dog will perform the important shrug. Bells will resume their sensible grammar. You will lift the cup someone left, drink what water taught itself overnight, and agree to the tune before you know you've agreed. That is all the god requires. The coast learns to breathe with timber and rope. Long before the sun chooses a path up the white walls, the harbor rehearses its low grammar. Hull against quay, fender against stone, quite accepting the steady responsibility of knots. Water keeps its oath to rise and fall by a hand's breadth, no more, no less. Gulls speak only enough to remind the air that wings exist. This is Poseidon's kindness when he is in a domestic mood. No tridents hurled, only the great patience of tides and the small intelligence of moorings. Breakwaters do their work with a quiet pride. From the outer stones you can see how the sea practices, refrains, long lines turned into shorter ones, the lid placed gently back on the pot. Foam lifts, thinks better, and lays down again. Inside the harbor, boats mind their manners. They do not jostle. They confer a bump like a greeting through old rope, a creak that means I am here, a reply that means so am I. The masts keep a thin forest of verticals that salute any breeze that warrants it, and ignore those that do not. On the quay, mourning is measured in knots finished correctly. A fisherman's hands go through their inherited liturgy, coil, hitch, bend, check the splice, feel the life of the line. Salt has crusted the bollards into honest shapes. Rust has painted the iron clean in its own way. A boy carries a bucket half full, knowing that slosh is part of the lesson. He arrives with most of the water, and all of his grin. The sea approves such arithmetic. Poseidon walks here as a man with wet cuffs and good eyesight. He reads the color of the entrance, and decides how generous to be. He moves his weather a little to the left so a homecoming feels like consent rather than conquest. His trident leans against a piling the way a rake leans when the garden has already been watered. Power, this morning, is exhaustively useful. Current that sets a hand under keel. Swell that forgets to be cruel. Wind that remembers the window someone left open for bread to cool near. A harbor master keeps a ledger that is half tide table and half family tree. He knows which boats prefer stern to and which prefer bows, which captains listen well and which require a story to slow them down. He assigns space with the tact of a host at a full table. You hear, and you hear, and you next the old junk that needs conversation to keep it from feeling abandoned. The god watches the small choreography lines thrown, caught, made fast, and blesses it with a half nod that a gull mistakes for wind. Ropes make most of the harbor's senses. A spring line prevents collisions without taking credit. Breast lines do the heavy holding while pretending to lounge. Stern lines write short commas. Bow lines write long, confident clauses. Knots are punctuation that stays learned once learned. They are muscles memory written into hemp and fiber. A poor knot can teach humility, but a good knot teaches trust. And trust is why this inlet has a city and not a ruin. Farther down, under an awning bleached to the color of remembered blue, a woman mends a net that looks like a patient constellation. She loops and tightens, repairing the absence into usefulness again. A child asks why so many holes, and she answers because fish must arrive alive and leave alive, and because water needs to pass where it pleases. The god, who understands both containment and freedom, lets the tide underscore her point with a soft suck at the stones. The harbor smells of its honest chemistry, tar and pine, citrus and diesel, brine and old rope, iron worn by early light, a bronze bell, polished by time until it gleams with a polite sun, marks the start of market. Baskets come up from boats the way stories come up from sleep, one at a time, simple, convincing. Octopus, their opinions folded and reconsidered. Lion curves a poet would recognize. Silverfish stack like syllables. Seaweed glistens like punctuation found to be correct after all. Coins change hands without drama. A sprig of dill is tucked into paper as a small, green blessing. Over in the boatyard, heel blocks carry their kind, silent weight. A man in coveralls sands a plank until it remembers what straight means. Another lays a caulking iron like a priest lays a palm on a brow firm but kind. The sawdust smells like mountains in infancy. Poseidon is not jealous of trees. He understands that the sea sleeps best in hulls made from patience. If a whisper of wind tugs at a chalk line, hands shield it, and the mark stays true. Every harbor has its small rituals for safe returns. Here, a ribbon is tied to a certain bollard for a boat that once had trouble and now prefers not to. There, a hat is lifted to the chapel icon whose lamp has never gone fully out. A cup of water is poured over a new cleat, so the first drink it gives a rope remembers generosity instead of stinginess. The god of floods and horse and quake tolerates this human scale. In fact, he approves. He has learned that reverence grows better under roofs than under clouds. When boats depart, they go one at a time. An engine coughs like a smoker who has decided to live differently. A hand on the stern fends off a friendly neighbor. A bow dips at the breakwater, as if grateful for advice and eager for errands. Outside the arms of stone, the sea is large again, but not infinite. It is an office with long corridors and many doors, each labeled with weather. Poseidon arranges the labels so the day makes sense. A northerly that stays northerly, a chop that keeps its promises, a calm that arrives exactly when someone needed to find a wrench without swearing. At noon, shade becomes law. The cafe along the quay keeps its zinc counter cool. Glasses sweat gentle circles onto saucers. Anchovies in oil glimmer like second thoughts turned out to be good ones. A sailor reads a letter twice and folds it as though his palms were the original envelope. A woman delivers a jar of olives to a deck as if delivering a truce. The god sits with his back to the wall and his trident nowhere in sight and watches people remember that harbors are not only for boats. Afternoon finds work that the morning overlooked. A fender gets resin where it will protect pride more than paint. A child is taught the throw of a line, the wrist, the in, the follow-through, and continues practicing even after adults have stopped paying attention. A cat patrols registers of smell and writes a report on sardines that will be translated later into purring. A visiting yacht misreads the wind. 3 men, a woman, and 1 boy correct its mistake with their hands and their unworried words. The harbor owns its name again, haven. Toward evening, the sun draws its path across varnish and makes every surface a kind of gold that does not tempt thieves. Lights lift one by one, masthead, window, signboard, shrine. Lines creak in brief courses. The town's laundry exhale is caught by the breeze and made into a flag of domestic victory. A young couple walks the quay slowly and learns the names of boats the way a child learns the alphabet, curious, pleased, wrong, and then right. Poseidon keeps his weather at arm's length, allowing a curl of cloud to test the mouth of the harbor and then sending it elsewhere to practice. There will always be evenings when someone overdue does not appear. The harbor knows how to hold such an hour. The ledger is consulted. A phone kept under the counter is used to call a cousin on the next point. Binoculars make their tsk at the horizon. The god stands in the doorway of his small chapel and says nothing out loud. And then the running lights appear, late but correct, and the quayside conducts a quiet celebration. Lines made fast and shaken, soup moved from 1 bowl to 2. The bell does not ring because there was never a question. Still, a hand goes up to touch it. That is enough. On still nights the surface becomes a book, and the boat's paragraphs. You can read them without words. Here a fisherman, who will leave at 3. There a family, who will sleep on deck because the heat has requested it. Beyond a boat with new paint trying not to admire itself too much. The moon conducts and is conducted, her light turned into an avenue, boats into citizens. Poseidon, who has done grander things, allows himself to be satisfied by this municipal perfection. A harbor breathing with the city breathing with the shore breathing with the sea. What the god asks in return is maintenance and courtesy. Coil lines so someone else can find their coils beginning rather than ending. Leave a bucket under the tap for the next thirst. Keep a hand on a stranger's elbow when boarding at night until the deck admits ownership of the foot. Oil the winch that every boat borrows. If someone needs a tool, lend them the tool you actually like. The bad one teaches nothing. Praise weather without bragging about having predicted it. Carry this harbor with you. In conversation, be the fender that turns a collision into a nudge. In family, be the spring line that prevents banging during changes of tide. In work, be the cleat, small, unromantic, reliable, around which rope can turn and take its strain. In solitude, be the breakwater for your own storms. Place the stones of habit sleep. Food, water, kindness until waves break their pride and come in calmer, ready to be held. When sleep finally finds you, let it more correctly. Exhale as the line pays out. Inhale as it comes snug. Let the mind's harbor master walk the quay with a lantern. This thought secured. That one double-bitted. That old worry to be set on the hard for winter. Let the tide do its cinching work below your ribs. Let the chain hum one steady note down to the anchor that is simply your weight agreeing with the bed. And if you wake, listen. Somewhere a small bell in your chest is telling the whole house that everything holding you is holding you still.